here's the difference between our worldviews. If my worldview is true, then there's objective moral standard, meaning outside of humans. If your worldview is true, there's not.
Welcome, everyone. I have a guest today. He's a Latter-day Saint, and I came across, so this is Hayden. I came across Hayden after I did my interview with Jacob Hansen. He shared a debate that Jacob Hansen and Hayden had against some Calvinists Christians. So, and I believe James White was moderating. So that, so that's how I found out about you. And I've seen you a little bit in Facebook groups and stuff. So, I don't know, what else would you like to add? That's because that's basically all I know about you.
I'm just a guy who enjoys talking about religion, a guy who enjoys being challenged and challenging others and talking about things that matter. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Cool. I feel like a lot of Latter-day Saints, and this would have included me when I was practicing, are perfectly fine just avoiding any church topics outside of the church. So have you always been comfortable discussing your religion publicly, or is this something that's developed over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it probably started like a lot of young LDS members on my mission. I'm from Arizona, but I served a full-time mission in Salt Lake City. And so before you get called to Salt Lake City, you think everyone's a member and everyone's nice to the missionaries there. But you quickly realize that there's a lot of people who don't like the missionaries in the church, more so in like Salt Lake City proper, like downtown. When I served there was a lot of opposition and people who already had opinions, obviously, about us and who knew about us or thought they knew about us. So that's where I became... That was my first step into obviously having any religious conversation. In high school, I can't say that I understood the religion or any religion for that matter at all. But yeah, the mission started. And then, after the mission, went to college, got involved in other clubs and other things there. And obviously there was religious conversations happening. I was at SUU in Southern Utah in Cedar City. And there was lots of opportunity for discussion and disagreements amongst the student body and other things. And so, that was my kind of next exposure and more comfortable with that. And then coming out of college, I got hired to teach seminary full-time for the church. So that's a lot of what I do and what I think about and what I study is gospel related things. So, yeah.
Okay. So you're a seminary teacher now then?
Yep. Yeah. Well, we're in the summertime, so we don't have students right now, but yeah. I've been doing it. This is just finished my 5th year.
Wow. That's really cool.
So,
I mean, maybe this is a stupid question, but like, how do your employers think about like that your supervisors and stuff? How do they think about you engaging online? Do they care, or have you ever been worried about?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That when we did our debate, I made sure to bring it up to my supervisor and even my boss's boss, just to mention it to them to see if there's any issues. The church is really, really good about staying out of our personal lives. Like they don't monitor us. They're not, because I'm engaged online almost every day and, saying things that, maybe more bold than the church would say them. And I've never once had my supervisor employer approach me. Okay. And they've actually, I take that back. They have approached me, but it's, luckily it's been in praise to the content that I've engaged with, whether it's on Jacob's channel or on, Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely a worry. Like going into the debate, like I said, like, am I allowed to do this? Not only as a church member, but as a church employee, and there was no issue there. So
that's good.
There's a lot of trust from church leadership, at least in S&I and seminaries and institutes and employees, that I don't stress about that anymore.
That's good.
Obviously, if I was saying stupid things, maybe I'd worry, but I hope to say things that are not stupid or too stupid.
Well, you never know it. It's stupid, right?
Yeah. Until you say it, and then, yep.
Yeah. I might have more questions now that I know you're a seminary teacher. Like I
Sure.
was kind of curious, do you feel like the way you teach seminary is different than when you went through seminary? Like
Hmm.
because I don't know, maybe you're the similar age to me, but I feel like there was a lot of stuff that I learned recently. Like I read Saints, and that was kind of the start for me of going down it. My story's complicated because I would say I kind of was losing my belief, but then I lost my loyalty to the church, and that was started by reading
Mm.
Saints, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Sure.
I distinguish between like my beliefs and and having literal belief versus like loyalty to the church, because I
Hmm.
think you can actually lose your literal belief but still have loyalty to the church.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair, I think.
But so anyways, do you think there's a difference between the way, like kind of the curriculum that you're teaching now versus what you were taught?
Um, Curriculum, I mean, we're still doing the standard work. So we still switch off books every year. And now we're aligned with Come Follow Me. So right now we're in the New Testament. We just finished the Gospels. And we're going to pick up in Acts starting in August. But um, it's different from, so I graduated high school in 2013. So it's been 10 years last month. And although the content is the same, meaning the same books, the standard works, the methods that we're using and the mindset that we have is very, very different. It's turned from back then, as far as I understand, and having conversations with my employees now who taught back then and further back, uh, it's gone from what can I do as the teacher? What can I do to help these students learn, which was good and it worked, I think, for a lot of people and maybe not for others. Now, more so, we're turning, at least in Mesa, turning towards more of a mindset of what can the students be doing to take ownership and what can we do to get buy-in from the students so that they can kind of have ownership in their own learning. So in that way, it's a lot different, where we expect probably more of students than was expected of us.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. The content's the same. The way we go about it is the mindset, I think, is the best way to say it. It's very different. Our role as a teacher is very different
Yeah.
in a good way. In a good way.
Okay. How did the Calvinist debate come about? I'm going to switch back
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's a good story. So Daniel Constantino, I don't know if you've seen him online. He's on our. Are you on the Thoughtful Faith group? Do you see any posts
Yes.
there? So Daniel, he's on that group, and Oscar, I think he either is or was part of that group. Daniel, as far as I understand, at least he was. I don't know if he still is. I think he still is. He is the head of what they call Mormon Outreach for Apologia Church here in Mesa. Apologia Studios, you might know Jeff Durbin or
Yeah,
James
I've seen
White
him
that
on
you
YouTube quite
mentioned.
a bit.
Yeah, so they post a lot of Mormon content and things like that. Street epistemology, you might say, from a Calvinist point of view, which is funny because they don't ever really reveal that they are Calvinists when they do street epistemology, and they do that on purpose. And I've talked with them about that. But what happened was every 2 weeks, I think it is. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they used to, at least 2 years ago, they go to different LDS chapels around Mesa, maybe Gilbert. Maybe they may dip into a little bit of Gilbert or Tempe, but they go and they just hand out. They have their pamphlets, Gospel for Mormons, and it's a copy of Jeff Durbin's. I forget what the video is called. It's the one where he's standing in front of the temple. Maybe you've seen it. Jacob did a response to it, but it's that video in written form, just like it was. I think it was off the cuff. It wasn't a transcript, but they've made it into a transcript. And they hand that out, and they come to LDS chapel. So anyway, long story short, he came to my chapel here in Mesa, and when I pulled in to the parking lot, they were standing. They never come onto the property, but they stand on the sidewalk, and they try to give people coming in and stuff like that as they come onto the property. But I pulled in, and I immediately recognized their pamphlets because I'd seen them online and things like that. And so I parked my car real quick, ran over and said, "Hey, I have a meeting I got to go to right now, but can I come back and talk to you guys?" I approached them and said, "Are you guys from Apologia Church?" And they kind of were like, "Yeah, like, how did you know that?" And I said, "Oh, I've been waiting for this day for you to come to my church building because I really want to talk to you." So anyway, Daniel was there. A couple other people were there, and we started a friendship, and we had some they have a podcast, Oscar, who was in the debate, and they have a friend named Matt. They have a podcast, or had a podcast. I don't think they posted on it for a while, called Two Witnesses. And so they had me and Jacob on when Jacob lived here in Gilbert, in the Valley. And we did 3 episodes, I think, 2 hours each. So it's like 6 hours of conversation talking about various topics, LDS and Calvinist related.
On their podcast. You've been on their podcast.
On theirs, yeah. And I can send you those if you want to link them. They were great conversations and great guys. And the conversations were very cordial and they were very nice. Yeah. And so after that, we said, okay, we think we understand each of our positions. We hold to the authority of personal revelation and of modern day prophets. And you guys hold to the position of sola scriptura, which is the belief that the Bible is the sole infallible rule in faith for Christians. So let's debate that. That's a fundamental disagreement. You believe Bible alone. We believe Bible plus. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. So anyway, that's how, to answer your question, that's how the debate came about. And I think we all really enjoyed it. I think both sides won, but we'll leave that to the audience anyway.
Well, as you can imagine, I feel like both sides had won at certain points.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it'd be arrogant to not admit that all belief systems have strong points and have weak points.
Right.
And hopefully those came out in the debate, but.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys had a good relationship going into that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is probably why it turned out as well as it did. I wonder, like, that kind of format of debate, how beneficial it is. Like you were just saying, we both thought we won. And so what I see what happens in that kind of debate is kind of like you come in with your team and then you think your team wins. And I don't see a lot of minds changed or. Sure.
And most people who watch the debate, they just think their side got stronger. They had a bias going in. Of course, I think that's
there certainly isn't a lot of like understanding. It sounds like you did the understanding part during that podcast, maybe.
Oh yeah. So, between us. Yeah. This was not, the debate was not for us it was for the audience for sure. Those who took time and watched it. And I think it takes 2 or 3 run throughs to really understand what both sides are saying.
Yeah. I guess what my goal is I like to try to understand people and where they're coming from, and then maybe either find out where we're agreeing or where definitions are causing a gap or something. See, so I guess, so what did you find the benefit of that debate was then? Like, what is the benefit for the audience to watch that? If you just walk away thinking, oh, my side definitely won. If everybody's thinking that, like, what's the benefit of it?
Yeah, well, I maybe would say that not everybody, I would say a large portion of people watch it, and they're watching it with the intent of strengthening their own belief, right? So they will most people will dismiss the other side, even if they are making good points, and will use their side, if you will, their points to bolster their position and to use that in their own apologetics. I think there is a small, other than the benefit of us 4 who participated, I think we probably benefited the most from that.
Sure.
But there's a small minority, I think, of people who maybe don't have, and it's hard, we all have biases, but who don't have a strong bias in the game, who can hopefully objectively as possible kind of understand those arguments. I think if you really listen, and I'm saying this with my bias, you can start to understand that there are fundamental differences. And it was our goal, and it was their goal, to show how silly the other side, was, and how strong our side was. Now, debate is interesting because you can win a debate even if you're wrong, right? If you are a better debater, it's kind of an act, right? It's kind of a drama of a sort. That plays a lot into it, regarding, right? Because I saw a debate. So I'm a Republican, right? I'm a more conservative leaning, obviously. When I was in college, there was 2 clubs, like college Republicans and college Democrats. I can't remember what the names were, but they did a formal debate. And it was timed and it was cross-examined and kind of how we did at Apologia. And the Republican representative, he was the president of this organization on campus. And this is Southern Utah, so everyone's conservative.
Yeah.
He got obliterated by these far left-leaning students because he didn't study. He didn't know any of their arguments going in. He just thought, oh, this is, these dumb lefties. Like, I'm just going to destroy them. And he got massacred. Not because he wasn't right, in my opinion, but because he just didn't know how to debate. So anyway, there's a lot of moving parts, I think, in debate. But does that maybe answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that helps. I guess in a sense, you're saying that there is understanding happening. So people are going to hear things that they were unaware of. So there is, whether they still think their side won, maybe they understand the other side a little better.
Yeah, and it's fairly complex. So I think it does take a few listens, which I don't think most people are willing to do. It's kind of long. It's like 2 hours long.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that you understand maybe criticisms of your own views a little bit better too, because maybe you never heard them.
Yep. And I hope an honest, scholar or somebody who's interested in this can take those criticisms and wrestle with them. The worst thing you can do is dismiss them, right? Which is what most people, most Latter-day Saints and people in general do with our beliefs, because we are uncomfortable. It makes us feel, you even get that. Yeah. You even get that feeling in your gut or in your chest, like, oh my gosh, like, is what I believe wrong? I've had that experience before and I've had to get over that, but yeah.
Okay. So, I think we covered it. I was going to ask also, like, do you think there's any downfalls of that kind of format of debate? And if so,
there were some people who criticized us, even Latter-day Saints, who said that was a really dumb thing to do. Like, debate only breeds contention and things like that. And, at the end of the day, if you were to know what's happening in the background and behind the curtain, it wasn't contentious whatsoever, even though our words were probing, right? I think if I remember correctly, it's been a while, but part of our script was to identify sola scriptura as them worshiping an idol. And that's, for a Protestant, that's a huge deal, right? To say you're an idol worshiper. So anyway, it wasn't meant in contention. It was just to say, this is our view, right, on that. So some people saw that as contentious, and we saw it as, we just want to be as clear as possible.
So I've heard, I think it was in one of the Facebook threads, I saw you talking about, it was some idea along the lines of atheists are critical and don't have any positive claims to defend. Anybody can do that.
Yes.
Maybe you can restate that in a more clear way.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, that is a great question. So I think atheism, by its very nature, is conclusively deconstructive. What I mean by that is, atheism is not positing a positive claim. It's rejecting a positive claim, right? If theism is the positive claim, or a God that interacts with us exists, atheism is, no, he doesn't. Most, and I can't say all, most atheists I've talked to online and in person, they, and you may correct me, and I'm willing to talk about this, but I see them using it often as a shield to not have to defend anything. Most of the individuals I've talked to love to critique the church or religion in general, but when you ask them questions, it's a lot of, oh, we're not talking about me right now, we're talking about the church. Like if it's on a church video or a church post. I very seldom, now there are some, and I really enjoy talking with the individuals who do engage. Very seldom do I find someone who is willing to engage and posit or present a positive argument in contrast to what they're critiquing. Right. So if you're going to tell me there is no God, what is the alternative worldview to that? And what are the implications of a world with no God? I don't find many people wanting to engage that question. I don't know if you have, or we can talk about it if you'd like to. I think there's hours of conversation, but
I know. I guess my question is, what are your views of, I guess, the Bible? Like, do do you have a pretty literal view that the way that it's compiled is exactly how it's supposed to be? Like, that would be kind of close to the Calvinist view, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I don't know if
So,
it's interesting. Protestantism is similar to atheism in the sense that there's no head of it, right? For me, if you were to ask me a question, I would, if possible, I would refer you to who I consider to be the mouthpiece for God, which would be Russell M. Nelson, right?
uh-huh.
I would align myself with the church's position on anything, that they have a position on. For Protestantism and for atheism, there is no person to speak on behalf, and that's it causes a lot of problems for Protestants, because their answer will be, if you say, well, who gets the final say, they'll say, well, the Bible. And when you say, well, whose interpretation of the Bible is it, they'll say, well, the Bible. They'll go as far as to say, especially those from Apologia Church, the Calvinists there, they'll go as far to say that they don't interpret the Bible, that the Bible, we just take it at its word, and the Bible means what it says, which is nonsense, right? To say that you don't interpret words is to reject a fundamental reality of linguistics. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's a cop-out.
A little bit. I would say generally we can learn about what people probably meant by the words, and that might be the best. And understanding that you might not understand fully, but that there is an understanding. Like, if I wrote down a sentence and I say, hey, Hayden, yada, 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 I meant something by that. And whether you clearly receive it is something different.
Totally. And that's what our debate is. Funny that you'd say that. That's actually what our debate is. I don't know if you watched the debate. There was a part in the debate. Okay. Did you see the part where Jacob held up the "I never said I stole money" page? Do you remember that part?
I don't.
He actually got this from what is his name? He's a Catholic apologist. His name's escaping me right now, but he debated James White, I think in like the 90s on Sola Scriptura. And his name will come to me in a second, but he holds up a piece of paper, and Jacob did this in the debate, and he said, because we were talking about interpretation of words of the Bible, and Jacob held up the sign that said, "I never said you stole money." And he asked our opponents, do you know what I mean? I wrote this. Do you know what I mean by this? And they're kind of humming and hawing, and the answer ultimately, obviously, is no, right? You don't know the intent of a writing perfectly anyway, within the realm of our ability to understand, unless the person is able to tell you what they meant, right? Even if, in our debate opponents, one of the arguments they brought up is, well, if my wife tells me she loves me, I don't have to interpret that. I just know what that means. And the response is not exactly. What if she's saying it sarcastically? And what if it's through a text message? Or like, interpretation is embedded in talking about how I view the Bible. Interpretation is embedded in everything we do as humans, right? Even me talking right now, you have to interpret using your senses. I don't know if you're familiar with Jacob's collective witness model.
I don't know. Well, no, this is very postmodern of you, these ideas.
Okay. So yes, in the sense, now I'm not saying there's no absolute truth. I'm saying to posit that we can know exactly what all of the writers of the Bible wrote just by looking at the words and doing no computing whatsoever is nonsense, right?
Yeah. I guess the way I'm looking at it is, if I go and read writings of I don't know, any historical figure, I'm going to be doing the computing like you're saying. And I'm just saying that as far as like, you are trying to understand what they meant by it, not that you're going to be perfect at understanding it. And just like in that way, you could do that with the Bible. So I'm not sure that you necessarily need to make a claim of personal revelation when trying to understand that. You could just use your own intellect to understand it like you would understand any historical document.
Yes. And I'm not making the claim that when we write something, it necessarily has multiple meanings. When you bring up postmodernism, I view that as, well, there's no absolute truth. Things can mean different things to different people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying And I would argue that at the basis of knowledge is what we call personal revelation or communication with the divine. And we can talk about that, and that's an interesting topic. But in regards to my view on the Bible, to say that without communication with the divine, we can know, even rationally, everything, all of the intents of all of the authors of the Bible, I think is impossible. I mean, here's one example. The Bible says the Father and the Son are one. Is there more than one way to look at that on its face value? There is, right? And I'm right, because there are Trinitarians who I think are very intellectual and very bright, who believe that the intent of the author was that they are one being, three persons but one being. When Latter-day Saints would say no, three persons, three beings, right? So that's my point, is to claim that they know it all, because that's what you kind of have to do if you believe the Bible's infallible, right? You have to claim that you know what the Bible is saying. I'm saying it's helpful and even necessary to have, especially a mouthpiece for God or personal revelation. So anyway, that's kind of long-winded, but I hope that makes sense. I think there's
in the way that that problem that you were seeing with the interpretation is, from my understanding, some of the original thinkers of postmodernism, that was the problem they saw as well. But they didn't. But so that's what I meant by that. If I were to try to understand postmodernism and not just say equals bad, but just try to grant like what they were trying to say, there is a problem there, and it's a problem we have to live with. But
sure.
I think yeah.
Can I ask your stance on that? I know you're the interviewer and I'm the interviewee.
No,
but
that's fine.
Do you have a stance on? Yeah, go ahead on that topic.
Go ahead. Finish your question.
I was going to say, like, just on the nature of truth, the nature of knowing. Do you take a stance on those topics?
I think my favorite take, and I borrowed it, so I want to give credit. It was Jonathan Haidt. He was talking to Sam Harris, and they were talking about this whole idea of truth. And I think that there is some kind of truth out there that is worth striving for, but we're not very good at knowing what it is. And Jonathan Haidt kind of said it. I wish I had the quote. I should probably have it written down.
Can I ask a question about that? When you say truth out there, can you? That's kind of like, what do you mean by that? Truth out there, like true. Like, is it true that we're talking right now, even over the internet? Right, that's true, as far as I can tell. Anyway, what do you mean by truth out there?
Probably in an objective truth type of way. Like in the way that you would talk about an objective truth, but we're not very good at knowing what it is. So like, for example, one of the things that bothered me when I was watching the debate that you guys did is it's like, I'm not sure how good it is to know that God can communicate with you if you don't know that God is communicating with you.
Sure.
So like if you're really bad at knowing whether that came from God or whether it came from yourself, then that's not a very good method for knowing truth ultimately. And I understand that Jacob has come up with his
collective witness model,
and that's fine, but it's still not convincing for me.
Sure. So that's a great point.
Well, let me finish Jonathan Haidt's thing.
Oh yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So he basically there's no point in believing in objective truth if you can't know what it is. But Jonathan Haidt, his kind of silver lining is that we're better at knowing what it is with the help of the criticism of those around us. So like basically, if we help each other see each other's blind spots, that's going to get us closer than we can alone.
I would agree with that.
Which I strongly believe that, which is why I do my best to talk to people I disagree with, because it's not that I think I'm right and they're wrong. I think we can find something better, not necessarily in the middle, but through understanding and stuff. Like I think.
And that was kind of we talked about Uber Mormon before we started. That was kind of our I think ours, and because I think me and Jacob I had a conversation with him, and me and Jacob, but I think all three of us went into that conversation with that attitude. And actually, that's a Jordan Peterson. I think that's one of his principles in his book is assume that everyone you talk to knows something you don't, or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you, which I totally agree with. I think going in, like we talked about debate, feeling like you're just going to destroy somebody, it's like you're not going to learn. There has to be a hint of humility.
Sure.
So yeah, so I would agree with you.
Yeah, but anyway, you were gonna move on to something else.
Yeah, we're talking about this is more epistemological, but like, what good? I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong. What good is revelation, or what good is the divine speaking to you if you're not very good at knowing, right, whether or not it's from God?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the key. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think prophets throughout time, especially President Nelson today, have constantly, what's the quote from President Nelson? He said, I urge you, or I plead with you, to increase your ability or capacity to receive spiritual revelation, because you won't be able to survive spiritually in these latter days without it. In other words, that's the goal. Mm-hmm. And really, if we want to get into to Jacob's thing or whatever, we can talk about how we know things. I think on a reality level, the only way we actually can know something, the pure definition of know, is to have it communicated directly from the divine to you, not through your senses, not through seeing or feeling or touching or smelling or hearing, but to you, whatever you are. You may say your spirit or whatever, but everything else, like Descartes said, on a rational level, you can't really know for sure anything other than that you exist. I don't know. You're familiar with that. And yeah. And I agree with that, because I've had dreams, and maybe your viewers have had dreams where in the moment, after you woke up, you knew it was a dream, but in the moment, your brain or your being thought it was real. Mm-hmm. Or people who have dementia, right? They see things or experience things that are not real, that they genuinely think are. And so on a rational level, we can have 99.99999 repeating percent assurance or confidence that what we're observing in the world is real, but the 100%, we can't ever quite get there because of even those simple facts. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or want to talk about that at all.
Yeah. So Peter Boghossian would, when he does his street epistemology, he will ask people when they're on their lines, like, how certain are you? Mm-hmm. Or maybe that's not him. Maybe that's Anthony Magnabosco.
No, I've seen him do that. Like, or what would cause you to move?
People are out there doing street epistemology, they'll ask you, okay, what's your confidence level? And then they'll talk to him for a little bit. And then when they're done talking, usually they might lower their confidence level.
Sure.
So it's interesting. I remember talking to Jacob Hansen about this very thing. And when I hear that, like, I'm sympathetic to this idea of, we don't know what's real, but assuming what we're experiencing as real is real, and, that's going to be in our 99, sure. Mm-hmm. When you talk about the spiritual revelation, do you feel like you can get that 99 sure with the spiritual revelation as well?
100%. That's the point, is that you can only
100.
Yes. Yep. Now, can I prove that to anybody else on the earth? Absolutely not. I think
what does that mean to have 100? Like,
it's to know. I don't know how else to say it. It's so let me ask you a question. Let's say that everything that Mormonism currently teaches is true. Let's say everything just grant it for a moment. What would it mean for the divine to communicate to you? Like, what would that look like? And what would that mean for an individual who's having divine communications with God? And it's hard to picture that because we view everything through a rational lens.
And maybe I always have, because I never had any kind of experience that seemed... I remember one time trying to explain to my husband, I said, I I know the church is true. Like I know farming is true. Like I couldn't
Mm,
quite put into words. Like I was trying to
okay.
describe to him, there's something that I feel strongly about, that I am passionate about. And and so then it started, and then that got my wheels turning. When I had that realization, I was like, well, if it's because of how I was brought up, if it's because,
Hmm.
how can I trust any kind of knowing like that? Like, yes, I
Hmm.
know that it's true, but how can I know
Hmm.
if, and so any kind of spiritual experience I had was on that same level, where I could have, emotional experiences. I mean, I say emotional, but I mean, I
Hmm.
understand that there's like a deeper,
Sure.
um, there's a deeper experience that you can have that gives you meaning in life. It makes you feel like you're where you're supposed to be. It makes you feel like
Hmm.
you're on the right track, you're heading the right direction, whatever that is. I've had that feeling, but I can't say that I've ever had any kind of, uh, I don't know, like nothing beyond that.
Okay. So like a revelation or a divine
I always
communication.
considered revelation when I was practicing Latter-day Saint. I always pictured it being through my own thoughts, and with understanding that I could be wrong sometimes, but I felt that I was being guided. I remember one time, like, when I prayed to go to a school to decide which school to go to, I had basically sixes as far as cost went and the quality of education I felt like I was going to get. I prayed and received nothing. And I just remember getting the guidance and felt like it was good guidance. It was like, you make the decision, and if it's the wrong decision, you'll get the feeling that it's the wrong decision. So you can't, sometimes you can't,
Mm-hmm.
like, it was like, you can't just expect God to tell you what to do. You have to act. And so I always felt like I was acting, and I always felt like God was guiding me, if that makes
Sure.
sense. Like
Sure.
I never had a for sure, yes, you did what God just told you to do, other than just that feeling of being in the right place, the right moment, whatever
Hmm.
that
Sure.
feeling is.
I think most Latter-day Saints have that experience. I may be in the minority, and it may be on a Latter-day Saint level radical of me to say something like this, but like I don't think God cares. I mean, I got to be careful about how I say this because people have experiences that are very precious to them in this realm.
Mhm.
But I think God cares about what we care about. I think there's some principles there. I think he can work with us from where we are in regards to even big life choices, college or employment, or even who you marry. I don't think God really cares about those things as much as we think he does,
Mhm.
from a Latter-day Saint perspective anyway. Um, I don't know. I've always, since I've been concerned about religion since I was 18 or 19 years old, I've always felt like God has provided more than enough truth through prophets, ultimately through
Mhm.
scripture and modern prophets. And it's okay to pray. I'm not saying you shouldn't pray about, where you go to school or who you marry. And people have done that and they've received confirmations, and they probably have. I'm probably wrong. But I kind of like you, maybe a little bit. Whenever I've prayed, I've never felt like God had this one plan for me. It was more so like, you get to choose. And I'm okay with basically everything you want to do as long as you are living the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't care where you go to school. I don't
Mhm.
care who you marry. I mean, he may care if you get sealed in the temple, if you're on that covenant path we say now, but I don't, where you live. I think God lets us choose. But I'm speaking from a Latter-day Saint lens, but I don't know if that makes any sense, or if that rings true to you from when
Well,
you were a Latter-day Saint. But
I would say that what you just described is what I described, but I was trying to understand more of that knowing,
yeah,
that knowing that God, where did that play? Like, I'm not asking
sure.
you to share your spiritual experience, but I'm just trying to
No.
understand like what
Hmm.
that means. Like, here's an example. I had several people when I was pretty open about my I don't know what to even call it, about my collapse of belief, or at least my collapse of loyalty to the church. I was pretty open with some people, and, they shared some pretty special experiences for them. And I think, I don't have a lot of judgment on that. Like, I think that told them something that they needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
But as they were telling me those experiences, to me, that just told me that they were where they were supposed to be. It didn't tell me the thing they thought it told them. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like, for example, there was I don't want to necessarily share it. I'll just say that, like, someone they would share a really powerful experience, and then that gave them the testimony of the church. And in my mind, I'm like, well, why is that a testimony that the church is true, and not just a testimony that the universe was where it wanted you to be? Like, you could totally be a pantheist and have that same experience be meaningful to you.
Sure. Yeah. And that, like I said before, even our deepest beliefs have weak spots. And I think one of the greatest critiques of personal revelation being our mode of truth or receiving truth is that, in a way, I mean, I think there are arguments against it, but in a way, framed in the right light, it can be used against us, right? Because what if and we can talk about this, what if a Muslim comes up to me and says, God told me that I'm supposed to be Muslim? On face value, depending on how well I know this person or how much time I have with this person, I may just say, okay, yeah, that's fair. I may not engage. If I had some more time, I think it would be appropriate to talk about, why we believe the divine is speaking with us, right? And it's up to each individual person to determine, truth. And not to sound more postmodernistic, but and I'm not saying there's more than one truth. I'm saying there's one truth, if you will, but infinite perspectives of the truth. And so I don't know if that rings true to you, but there does come a point where, at least in conversation, that I might say, yeah, if God's telling you this, I may disagree with you, but I think it's a good argument, right? What is greater than the creator of the universe speaking to you? Like, is there a greater witness than that? I don't know of one. If there is a creator, I don't know of one greater than that. And how do you know if the creator is talking with you? Well, that's a whole nother debate of spiritual epistemology and how do we validate our spiritual experiences? Because can you misinterpret spiritual communication? Absolutely. And that's another issue, right? That we have to wrestle with. Right. But that's the purpose of, can we improve in our receiving personal revelation? Sorry, you got the seminary teacher coming out in me now. Like this is such an important topic for Latter-day Saints anyway. In regards to knowing or testimony, right? Testimony is the root of why we do what we do. So anyway.
Right. Well, and so I guess that takes me back to, I was surprised to hear you say that it was like 100%, like you can know 100%. So I guess going back to that, what does that mean? Like, you're 100% sure, you can be 100% sure that you're in the true church. You can be 100% sure that, like, Russell M. Nelson is the prophet. Like, what
Sure.
kind of
anything
information can you be 100% sure about?
Any information.
Okay, let me ask you this. Could someone think they have that 100% level, but be wrong?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not really 100%.
No, here's what you're missing maybe. If God is actually speaking to them, how more sure can you be than that? Now, the debate is God speaking to you?
Well, I don't doubt that people can be certain of wrong things, and think that they heard it from God even.
Sure. Oh, yeah. People think they hear things from God all the time, and then they do stupid things.
Yeah, so absolutely. What I'm saying is, as a person trying to understand, even if God is talking to you, like I'm saying, what kind of level should I, as a person that feels like I have 100% certainty, should I actually think I have found the truth, or should I have some humility and be like, what's that? That's why I'm like
Oh,
surprised
sure.
to hear you say 100%. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, I mean, depends on how you wanna frame it. I think there always has to be a level of humility, because even going back to our debate in Apologia, there was a question maybe in the cross-examination where, and I think different Latter-day Saints may answer this differently, but one of the questions they asked us was, could you be wrong about Joseph Smith being a prophet? And to your point, the answer is, practically yes. But if God is actually speaking to us, the answer is no, right? But then again, how do we know if God is speaking to us? And that's going back to what I said originally, we started opening this, is you cannot prove that, right? When we want to, like, how does somebody know if God is actually speaking to them? It's a great question, and it's one we have to wrestle with every single day, I think. Well, at least on important topics. But I don't think there's any method of determining that for another person.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Now, what if? How do I want to say this? Now, if I believe God's speaking to me and He's told me something, and let's say I am 100% sure, or let's say God actually did speak to me. That's kind of the only way to say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we communicate, and then somebody else comes to me and says, "God told me this," and it contradicts what God told me, then I think it's appropriate to say, well, no, like, I disagree with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a personal, right? I don't know personal revelation to be anything but that, personal. It's kind of like the old adage, like, what does salt taste like? Or how do you describe what salt tastes like? It's like, well, you have to taste it, right?
Right.
Kind of that same idea. It's like, can you explain that to somebody else? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I see what you're wrestling with. It's like, is it
Well,
really 100% if we could be wrong?
right.
But my point is, if it is God, then anyway.
I'm assuming that you can understand why someone on the outside of that belief that God can speak to you on 100%, why they'd be skeptical.
Yes.
And it's not out of just trying to destroy your beliefs. It's just in a way of trying to find truth, if it does exist. Like, I feel like that is not very, like, if I'm striving to discover what truth is, and I feel like truth is very tightly intertwined with reality. Like, doesn't matter how much you believe, like, a glass door is not there. If you try to walk through it, you are going to hit the glass. Like,
Sure.
I feel like reality bats last.
Sure. Okay, so now it seems like you've kind of stepped into a postmodernist, like, can we actually know anything? Is that kind of what you're
I
saying, or
believe
help
we
me?
can know that there's a glass door there, and I think that it's important
What?
to try to know what it is. And I
Okay.
think it's important to not, if at one point, like, my ancestors passed down a belief that there is no glass door there, I think it's important to try to push against what was passed down
Oh, sure.
too.
Yeah, I think
And not just hang
absolutely.
on to things just because we know it's true.
Oh, on
Like,
this topic, we're on the same team.
yeah.
We're on team truth. Now my question for you is, are you saying that you can know with 100% certainty, or would you frame it in that
No,
way?
I don't think I think that is the difference between my belief. Like, a postmodern belief would say that, um, well, there's some truth. There is some truth in the way you're, like, and as far as psychology goes, I do believe there's some truth as far as your beliefs matter. Like, you can
Oh, yeah.
change the outcomes of your life based on your beliefs, like positive affirmations and
Oh, it's
stuff like that.
required. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So, and it's like Sam Harris was saying in the Jordan Peterson Sam Harris debate. He's like, man, if you really believe that you're Superman and you can do anything, that's going to, possibly improve your life. And he was comparing that to believing in a God that has your back, right?
Sure.
So just because that makes it better doesn't mean there's actually that you are actually Superman, or that there is actually, or
Right.
what you're imagining. But it's still, see, and I think Jordan Peterson would say that's still true because it changed your life, right? So it became true in a pragmatic way, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
so I think that's the strongest, in my opinion, the strongest. But I can't force myself to believe something I don't believe either. So
Sure. So help me understand, because correct me if I'm wrong.
That was very.
No,
I'm sorry.
no, it's good. When you said, I think you said, when I asked you, if we can know things. You said yes.
We can know things with a certain degree of certainty, and I think that
Okay.
anytime someone says 100%, that it's a red flag in my mind.
Okay. I
But
think we're talking about the same thing. I think if you're coming at this from a rational point of view, I'm 100% on board with you. I think you can be more or less certain, or when you become so confident, you might use the language of, I know this, right?
mhm,
I know that this microphone is here. I would use that language. Now, do I have 100% rational certainty? Of course not, because I could be dreaming or, et
yeah.
cetera. I think I agree with you there. I think I'm using a different category or definition of knowledge when I use the 100%. Does that make sense? And maybe it's not
No,
one
that
that
actually
you
makes a
would.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
John Vervaeke
That's
talks about different ways of knowing. Like you have
okay.
propositional knowing, and you have
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. He had like 4 different kinds of knowing, and then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we use knowing for all 4 types.
Sure.
But to me, the spiritual knowing that I feel like you're talking about that
Mm-hmm.
has a different category. It's not that I am saying that doesn't apply. It's just that sometimes I feel like there's this sleight of hand going on when I'm talking to
Mm-hmm.
some people where they will I'm talking about this knowing, but then they'll make a propositional claim.
Okay. Here's a thought on that.
Hmm.
And this just muddies the water just a little bit more. And I promise it's not a sleight of hand, but and I don't mean
So you
to.
understand what I mean? Like why
Yes.
I would.
Yes. And I don't
I'm
mean.
not demeaning
Yeah.
someone having a certain kind of knowledge of knowing that the gospel works for them and it makes their lives better, and they have that kind of knowing, and then but then they make the claim that they know that something over some other propositional truth over here is true. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I promise you, I'm not speaking out of both sides of my mouth. At its core, even rational knowledge is rooted in spiritual knowledge. So, not to be
Well,
more
that's
confusing.
fine. No,
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of understand what you mean by that, and I
Yeah.
don't necessarily have a problem with that. But when it comes to like your daily life,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, when it comes to your daily life, and I mean, you can imagine that. I mean, this would be like the left argument of how the church isn't good for like a small minority of people.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not good for a minority of people, then everybody over here could be saying, yes, it's true, but they're not having the same experience as this person over here, and they're getting the experience that it's not true, but they don't know what to do because their whole social network is all around them saying it's true.
Yeah, that's a sticky and common issue in our age, for sure, in our generation.
Yeah. So you were saying that like even rational knowledge is founded in this other kind of knowledge, but I guess my point is you wouldn't grant that to somebody that was trying to make some kind of claim of I'm trying to think of, like you do a study and you find out that I'm trying to think of a good example that I don't know that some medicine works and you find and you do the study and the medicine doesn't work, and someone says, well, I know that the medicine does work because of this spiritual knowledge, right? Like there's just some categories that you wouldn't allow people to use that argument, even if the person is saying, well, even your rational scientific method is still rooted in the spiritual knowledge. Like we've developed it to a point where we can make like we can try to have good confidence levels for certain things, right?
Yes. Now let me clarify what I said about rational being rooted in spiritual.
Okay.
Now, and I derive this from Latter-day Saints.
Understanding. So,
no, I think well, let me just say this. I'm taking this from Latter-day Saint scripture, mainly Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, maybe a little bit in the Bible and Progress Price. I think it's scattered, but specifically maybe in the D&C. I would argue from if those documents are true, right? If those are true revelations from a divine being, God, as we understand him as Latter-day Saints, I would argue that everything we do and everything we intake is naturally and necessarily spiritual. And I realize that, an atheist would reject that outright, and that's fine. That we disagree at a more fundamental level where we can't even get to that conversation, right?
Well,
But
and
if
you're also talking about an idea. I'm not familiar with this, so it's
yeah,
interesting that you've
yeah.
gotten
Well,
this from the scriptures. Is this something
you've
you've come up with, or have you been taught this? I'm curious.
no, I mean I'm no, I think this is an observation I have from
Okay.
study. When you get paid to study scriptures, it's easy to study. So anyway, you might be familiar with Moroni 10:5, right? Or Moroni 10:4 and 5 about the Book of Mormon, when Moroni is saying, pray to know if it's not true. If you have a sincere heart, real intent, having faith in Christ. You've heard that a billion times. The verse that we don't spend enough time on, verse 4 is great, and that's, I think, valid and necessary. Verse 5 says, and by the power of the Holy Ghost, you may know the truth of all things. And I think that if that is true, if the Book of Mormon is true and Mormonism is true, we'll say, that is the start, of my epistemology. That's the start of discovering what on earth knowledge is. And knowledge is equivalent to light, the Doctrine and Covenants says, and how light is given to us and it's taken away. And I'll just say it like this, for you and for your viewers. If you guys have never read the Doctrine and Covenants all the way through and done a serious study of the revelations of Joseph Smith that are found in the Doctrine and Covenants, you are missing out. Even if you don't believe them necessarily, even just understanding where that man was and the truth, what I would consider to be truth, coming from his lips, from the divine, it is mind-blowing. There are, you might even say, philosophical solves that philosophers since the beginning of time have struggled with, that are solved in the Doctrine and Covenants regarding some of these things and more. I like to say often that Joseph's Mormonism, I'll just say, solves so many issues around atheism, around Protestantism, around Catholicism, around theism in general. For example, so you're familiar with Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman is one of the lead critics of biblical texts, right? He's former Protestant turned atheist. And a lot of his study is focused on not necessarily the what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not that you can't trust the Bible or the reliability of the Bible. It's focused on the contradictions of the Bible, right? The fallibility, we'll call it. And so a lot of Latter-day Saints flock to him because he has a lot of good content on the fallibility of the Bible. That being said, he didn't leave. He's clear about this. He didn't leave the faith because of the fallibility of the Bible. He still was a Christian while being fallible. The problem that he left over is what he calls the problem of evil, which says, and all Christians besides Latter-day Saints deal with this. Why would an all-loving, all-powerful, able to do anything God create a world where there is so much pain and suffering and sickness and torture? And he left over that. And modern Christianity, they don't have an answer for that question. The answer is we're the pot and he's the potter. And this is a more Calvinist take on it, but he can do whatever he wants, is what they would say. Ultimately, they would embrace it. A lot of Christians would say, oh, I don't know. It just is what it is. Latter-day Saints, on the other hand, and one example of the revelations of Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon is full of it. You're familiar with the phrase where it says God would cease to be God. You've heard that before. If God did this.
Right. I feel like that's fair. Yeah, I never had a problem. Let me see if I can finish your thought here.
Yes.
Just that God is subject to the laws of the universe. Just so he's not.
As you start to dip in to the revelations of Joseph Smith, you start to realize how I mean, from an atheistic point of view, how brilliant he was. This man, if not a prophet, was the brightest human being who has ever lived on the face of the planet. And I feel comfortable saying something like that because of the content or the caliber of what he produced, even just in the Doctrine and Covenants, but other places as well.
See, you say something like that, and I say, yeah, maybe he was an exceptional person, and that's why he was able to come up with a whole theology. But then that kind of discredits the whole, oh, look what he did with the Book of Mormon, because he was just a dumb farm kid.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I don't know how much time you have left.
I actually am willing to keep talking.
Do you want to go into Book of Mormon? You brought up like him being a farm boy. I have some things that you might find interesting on that topic.
I don't know. Maybe that's kind of
okay. I think yeah.
I am curious what your thoughts on like street epistemology in general are. Like when, Peter Boghossian goes out there and he says, what's your confidence level? And then he encourages people to have less confidence. Like, do you think that's a good thing, or is that just like a deconstruction thing in your mind? Like,
I'm so sorry. Say that one more time for me.
Okay, so Peter Boghossian, Anthony Magnabosco, they'll go out and do these street epistemology interviews, and I think they would say their goal is to lower people's confidence in certain things.
Have they said that?
I think they do that. That's why they will ask someone, well, how confident are you of that belief? And then they'll ask them questions about it, especially if it's something that they disagree with them on. Like, so it would be kind of weird to meet somebody and they're 100% sure about something that you don't think is true. Like, naturally, anybody is going to want to lean them less confident, even though you could be wrong as well.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. Like, yeah. I guess that's fair. I've never considered it said that way. I may say like they like to challenge people, but that's kind of the same thing in a way.
Yeah. I mean, they I think have this fundamental belief that you should have good reasons for believing things that you act out in your life. Totally. And they would say that religion is not worthy of your acting out. I'm not sure I agree with that personally, but
okay. I didn't know. I thought Peter Boghossian was religious. I didn't know that.
Oh no. He's the one that actually wrote the book that like motivated, I think, Anthony, that motivated the street epistemology online phenomenon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I need to look into that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He just happens to be also skeptical of some of the claims that are made politically on the left as well.
Sure. So, yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah.
His segments are so good though. I love when he drops a new video.
Yeah. I think he's just a genuinely curious person. Like, I think, yeah.
Yeah, he seems like good faith actor for sure.
So anyway, when you think of like kind of that epistemology, people out on the street asking people questions, like, do you feel like that can be a tool for good, like trying to get people closer to the truth, or do you always think it's a deconstruction type like move or tool?
No, it's great. I think it's good if you are willing to provide an alternative. I don't, we may like, because I don't ever see Peter.
Is that only in religious situations, or is that because I mean, I'm certainly there's like far out beliefs that someone could have that you would be like, hey, why do you believe that? And then you don't give them alternative to believe. Like, so like someone could say, hey, I believe in insert your thing that we both don't agree with, like we don't think is true. Like, I guess in my mind, like, why does there have to be, let me ask you this. Yeah. Why does there have to be a replacement for a belief in God if we're understanding God in the wrong way? Like, we're leaning on the understanding of man's interpretation up to this point, but God really is something different that is maybe even incomprehensible.
Sure.
Like, so for example, if I say, why do you believe God has a body of flesh and bones? And so I'm not necessarily I'm not deconstructing necessarily the idea that there's meaning in life. I'm just deconstructing the idea that God brings meaning to life. Does that make sense?
I think so. Like often online, I will approach critics, most of them are anonymous, whether it's on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
Or Facebook. It doesn't have to be anonymous, or in person. If I have the opportunity, some of the questions I really love to ask anybody is, first question is, what God do you worship? And that kind of puts them on the spot of providing some information. Do you know, Greg Koukl? Greg Koukl, he wrote a book called Tactics.
I don't think so.
If you're into it's street epistemology book, basically. It's geared towards evangelicals, but he has a really good portion. It's even the first chapter where he walks into this store and there is a woman wearing a pagan necklace or something. It wasn't Christian. It wasn't Abrahamic religion. I forget, pagan probably. And he shares this example where he asks her about it. And she says, oh, yeah, I'm pagan, I think it was. And he started asking her questions about her fundamental beliefs. And she was a cashier in this store. And he starts asking her questions about life. Does she value life? Like, just very casually. And I don't know. You have to read it. He says it way better than I'm telling you. But he ultimately is asking her questions. I'm butchering this right now. He asks her.
SE's this pagan witch person.
Well, here's the question he asks her. He says, do you value life? And she says, absolutely. And he says, oh, then you must be against abortion. And she says, well, no, I believe in the freedom of choice. And basically this book, and this is the first example he gives, asking people what they believe is where you get down to the root foundational conversations of disagreement. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, if I were to ask you, Marty, what God do you worship? How would you answer that question? Mm-hmm. And it may be no God, or you may spin it however you want. It doesn't really matter.
Do you really want me to answer? Because I can do my best.
Yeah, if we have a minute, let's try it.
I would say that I don't worship with a religion, but I would say God is probably like the ideal, whatever that is.
Okay.
The ideal, most good thing, good.
Okay. So let's play this like we're chatting online. I don't know who you are. My next question would probably be, how did you come to that conclusion?
I've been influenced by Jordan Peterson.
Okay. Okay, fair. He's a good guy to listen to, especially if you're not religious. He takes that stance, right?
I was religious when I started listening to him, though, so be careful.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, my next question would probably be, so you don't actually believe that there is a God being. Is that correct?
I'd say I don't know. I would say...
Okay.
Like in the same, and I might even use this example, in the same way that I don't, like, a dog can't read, I'm kind of in the opinion that humans haven't figured that out.
Okay, fair. So, okay, let's take a step back.
In order to believe in, I think, that there's a creator, I think we'd have to understand how it was created, and then it would point to the creator, and I just don't see that we can
do that.
Understand that. You get into quantum. You get into the kind of physics that only like a small percentage of people understand, and that kind of stuff. And I start to realize how dumb I am. And then I start to realize how dumb everyone is. And then that they're probably only on the cusp of possible understanding. And it's just so little. So I just think, I think generally, like, when I get after theists, it's that they're making too big of a claim. That's all.
Okay.
They're too confident.
Oh, that's right. And I don't mean to make this personal to you necessarily. I'm trying to give an example of like epistemology, like street epistemology.
Yeah.
Most typically I'm engaging people who are critical of the church. When I'm engaging an atheist, most of the time they are criticizing the church on some sort of moral issue. Like, for example, let's pretend that you are more left-leaning, and let's say you have an LGBTQ son or daughter, and they were bullied in the church. And you have stepped away from the church because you start to see the church as harmful to your child, right? Yeah. Which is fair. Like, I'm not telling someone they're wrong. There may be harmful things, but here's the issue with that stance. If that person who's feeling this way, and let's say they make a comment and they say, the church is responsible for all of the suicides of gay children in Utah or whatever. They may make a claim, something like that. I would approach them and I would ask them the questions I asked you. Tell me about your belief system. Do you believe in God? All these things. If they were to make that claim and then make the claim that you've just given me, that there's ultimately no God, but there's like, I don't even know if there's any substance there, to be honest. And I don't know if you would give me anything else, but like, I don't hear any sort of confidence in a higher power whatsoever. Is that?
Well, it's certainly not, it's not a knowledge of a higher power, but it is still the belief that I should act out the best version of myself. Like,
Okay. So here's my follow-up question for you. And I hope you're okay with this. I'm kind of
fine.
Role playing a little bit. You use the word should, which is it's a value claim, right? You should. My question for you is based on what? And so you can answer that, or I can explain what I'm doing.
No, I know where you're going with this.
Does that make sense? So this is a great Kokol thing.
Yeah, I would say that it would be based on my intuition, and it would be based on the wisdom of people that came before me.
Okay, you're starting to sound like Jacob Hansen a little bit. Those are two pieces of his collective witness model: intuition and authority. So,
authority is, certainly it is authority. See, I find
like
authority,
you're trusting other people. That's typically how he phrases it, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is great, by the way. I don't
I'm
think there's
definitely
anything wrong.
I like the idea of not like the whole Chesterton ideas of not tearing down a fence without knowing why it's there. Like, I want to know why it's there before I tear it down. It's not necessary. It's the wisdom of those that came before me, but not without the ability to update it when it seems like, well, I understand why this fence was here, and this fence is definitely outdated. Let's go ahead and take it out. Like, I'm okay taking out the fence once we realize that maybe that was,
Okay, so let me ask this question about the fence. By what standard do you determine whether the fence is appropriate or not?
I would say I'd go back to like a Jonathan Haidt kind of a thing. It would be making sure we look at all the angles and do our best. And then once we can't see a good reason for having the fence up, then it's probably okay to not have it anymore.
Interesting. Okay, so role play with me for a second. Take that role of the mom or whoever, dad, who has a LGBTQ child and is distance themselves from the church because they feel the church is harmful. Would you liken that fence? Let's say that fence is traditional marriage, and you as this disaffiliated member of the church.
Well, this works for my current worldview because I'm okay with gay marriage. So
okay, so perfect. So you had this traditional fence that you were raised with that said marriage is only between a man and a woman, and you've taken that fence down and you've replaced that with a new definition of marriage. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if it's a new definition of marriage.
Like, marriage is only between a man and a woman, is what the church would say.
Yeah.
Like that is marriage.
I'm not too concerned about the word. Like,
okay.
In my view, though, there seems to be the point of that commitment is probably to raise kids. And I'm okay with like Dave Rubin doing what he's doing. Like, he has made a commitment to another person and he's committed to. So to me, the more fundamental thing is like the family unit.
Okay.
And nurturing a family. And
and
that's more fundamental to me than it being a man and a woman.
Yeah. We're getting into a realm where I think I should preface that obviously the church's stance is clear on gay marriage, right? And I support that 100%. Now, should people be able to live their lives in a way that they see fit? Absolutely. And I'm not here to press that on anybody at this point.
Sure.
That being said.
So that being said, I would say that as far as gay marriage goes, I think the more important thing is that you have someone like when I think of like the benefits of being married, it's that I've found someone that can help improve my life and make
Hmm.
my life better by kind of in that same Jonathan Haidt way of like chipping off the sharp edges and stuff. Someone I
Hmm.
trust, someone that's willing to help me be the best version of myself, and I'm trying to help
Hmm.
him be the best
Okay.
version. So I wouldn't want to take that away from someone and encourage them to be like celibate their whole life, especially with
Hmm.
my view where I'm not sure there's an afterlife. Does that make sense?
Okay. Absolutely
So
it
that's
does. So,
why I would want to take that fence down personally.
okay. So my question kind of hones in on you're using value words like better and best,
Hmm.
right? You want, by what standard, when you say better,
Yeah.
you're going in one direction, worse is the other. What's the end all? Is there an end goal? Like, what are you walking towards when you say better, and what are you walking away from, or what are you walking towards
Oh,
when it's worse? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. It's yeah. I think that it's when I read scriptures or something like that, or I hear a scripture or someone's talking about heaven and hell, like I think that it's not talking about an afterlife. I think it's talking about this life. So I think
mm,
it's really hard to articulate, but I think that we all kind of know what a heaven is and we all kind of know what a hell is. And so I want to move toward heaven and away from hell.
mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
I think that by taking down that fence, um, it can make heaven available for more people.
okay. So here's my counter to that. When I was young, my parents had a rule for me and my brothers that we could not hang out with our friends on Sunday. We couldn't watch TV. We couldn't play video games. We couldn't do anything on Sunday.
Yeah.
For me, that was hell.
Hmm.
I hated it, and I resented my parents, in those adolescent years. But at the same time, that was I'll say my parents, but my dad specifically, that was his heaven, was to have a day where he could spend time with family and not work and study scripture, whatever it may be. So my question for you is like, would
What?
you agree? Would you agree that with your worldview, like heaven and hell, there's no objective heaven and hell. It's kind of perception or perspective.
Yeah, and I would say that I just kind of go back to that idea of wisdom and stuff, and just the understanding that at any like it's similar to your view. Like I could be wrong about what's heaven and what's hell,
Mhm.
but that is certainly
Okay.
the view that I have right now of what's heaven.
Okay. And now, okay. So let's be done with that part. Let me tell you why, though. That's such an important conversation. When you asked me about doing online epistemology or street epistemology or whatever, I have found now, by the way, I respect you, and I think every person's on their own path and they have to figure it out. And by the way, I think if I had your exact experiences and lived your life, I'd probably believe exactly what you believe. I don't think it's fair to fault somebody for their beliefs based on their life experiences. I think I can disagree, but
I actually feel the same way, which is why I have
yeah,
patience for pretty much anyone.
yeah, it's like, speaking of Pine Creek, you brought up Pine Creek. I don't know if that was before the show or during the show. One time I was on with Doug on his show, and he was talking to me about some of the things we've been talking about. And I came out and said that. I said, look, Doug, like, I know you don't believe in Joseph Smith. He didn't even really know who Joseph Smith was. He doesn't know Mormonism, really. I know you don't believe in a God. And if I had your experiences, I'd believe the same thing. And he was almost speechless. He didn't have anything else to say. He said, oh, okay. All right. Thanks for calling. Like, it literally ended the conversation. And he wasn't being contentious or anything, but I think when we can all come to the conversation saying that, and I try to say that out very often,
Hmm.
it just helps the attitude of the conversation. It's like, look, I'm not here to, hit you with a club of my religion. I'm here to learn truth, and I'm sure you're exactly the same. But
Yeah.
the reason I bring up this conversation, and I'm glad we talked a little bit about truth, is for atheists. I'll say for atheists, Protestants is you go about it a little bit differently. For atheists online and in person who criticize the church, the number one issue that they run into, and the number one reason I'm not an atheist, is because as soon as you step away from the church, especially for ex-members, step away from the church to criticize the church, you've now cut off the branch that you were sitting on.
Hmm.
to make your claim. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
here's what
it does make sense. And I'm like I've said
yeah,
earlier, like while I'm
yeah.
sympathetic to that idea,
Mhm.
um, I think I read the God Delusion by Richard Dawkins.
Mhm.
And he says something similar where it's like, it's funny that I learned, like, to be
Mm.
honest
Yep.
from church, and being honest, I honestly don't believe, like, and that's
Right.
really important to him. And that, I
Yep.
kind of feel the same way as that. Like,
Yes.
it's not that, um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you can learn truth from all places, right? Mormonism has no monopoly on truth, right? And that's kind of, I think it was Brigham Young who said it, like, if it's true, it's Mormonism, basically. But
Mhm.
my point was, I love engaging atheists on this topic and talking about somebody who critiques without providing a worldview. I have yet to find, and there are some people who talk to you, but very, very seldom will you find an atheist who wants to have an in-depth conversation about morality. Because when you
Well,
the
may
yeah.
I ask, so
Mhm.
why is my worldview subpar, I guess? Like, just because,
Mhm.
like,
I would
I do
say
believe, that, there's an objective truth worth searching for,
mhm,
because I think ultimately when you know what is real, it can make your life better. And
mhm.
I use better in the same way that I feel um, like I don't have a problem with saying that there is an ideal out there, that there's a
Okay.
better out there.
Are you talking about in grounds of morality as well? Like not just physical truth, but like good versus evil? Do you believe in good and evil actually exist?
Oh, so that's interesting. I like the idea that good and evil is in everybody. Like, I don't think there's necessarily a person out there that is 100% evil and another person out there that's like 100% good. I think it's in all of us, and I think that's
Mhm,
like, which is, I think, the right attitude to have is to try to fix yourself, like Jordan Peterson says, because I think as you
mhm,
fix yourself and you try to become like Christ, you try to become perfect, and Christ is like a story that I can get on board with, and saying that's a cool story.
mhm.
I'm pretty, as far as like whether he, like, this the story has lived on. It's clearly important in my mind, so I'm okay. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
like if we live in a materialistic world, like the material, like that is a positive claim that everything's material, right?
Mhm. And
Um,
Latter-day Saints agree with that, by the way. That's a Joseph Smith
right.
proposition.
So if we live, yeah, where there's rules and things like that, um there's, I think, an uphill trajectory and a downhill trajectory, and I think we should try to aim up. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
So
I,
so
I,
so.
so yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
Well, help me understand because, and when we talked about sleight of hand, right? That other conversation we were having, I feel like most atheists, and I'm not talking about you necessarily. I don't know where you stand on this. Most atheists have not thought about this long enough to have an explanation of. So my next question for you: you said there's good and evil in all of us. How do you determine what is good and what is evil? Right? As
Yeah,
is there an
in a
objective
similar,
good? Mhm.
well, I would run into the same issue that you have, like when you're trying to defend your beliefs. Like, it's like, well, I'm pretty sure this is the right direction. I'm pretty sure this is what God told me, was what
Mhm.
you might say, but I could be wrong, right? Like, I'm pretty sure.
Well, kind of. I would say it's kind of a straw man of us. I would say
Oh,
I
why?
know, I know 100% with 100% certainty that
But in
this is true.
practicality, you admitted that, like, you could be wrong. You could,
Um, if it's not God speaking to me, sure,
right?
yeah. But if it is God speaking to me, I that's knowledge. So,
Yeah.
because well, let me say it this way. I don't think somebody who rejects God can coherently provide an argument or a worldview with objective morality. When I say objective, I mean outside of us, right? I think anybody can say, "Oh, yeah, that's good and that's
I
bad,"
say objective reality exists, just like whether we think it exists or not.
but
Just
morality,
like you
though,
would think that
mhm,
God exists whether you believe he exists or not, right?
sure.
Like
So
there is a
so
reality out there. I
let,
believe
let's
that's what I'm talking about when I talk about objective
okay.
truth.
Let me ask this question. Do
And
you? Oh yeah, go
good.
ahead.
You
Do
can.
do do you believe it's objectively morally wrong to kill another innocent human being?
Yeah, that's tough. I'd have to lean on the I don't know.
Okay. And I can respect that. I think that's a better answer than most people will give. Because if you say yes, then you get down the rabbit hole of, okay, well, where does that standard come from? And there's a
Well, it's
million.
not just that, it's that
Mhm,
there are exceptions.
sure. Yes and no, because I said innocent. Do
Don't you
you?
think that there can be innocent people that are on both sides of like a war?
I would say it's not moral to kill an innocent person. I
So
would
it's
say
not
that's
moral. So are you like you're against wars?
if we're killing innocent people, yes.
Nobody's 100% innocent though.
What do you mean? What do you mean when you say innocent? I mean innocent like they're not trying to harm me or somebody else.
So you're not innocent when you're engaged in a war then. So you could be
Um,
killed in a
well, no,
moral way.
no. So the church's stance on war is one that I hold, and it's basically when we are defending our country, our rights, our liberty, our religion. Uh, War is uh, permissible. But like for example, like I don't know a ton about this, but let's for a current event, right? Russia, Putin getting into Ukraine. I think that's wrong.
Mhm.
Now, there's conversations to be had about old Russia and who does it belong to and all these things. I think what he's doing is morally reprehensible, and he's going to be accountable. I think he knows that, and he's going to be held accountable to that. Hopefully, the Lord will have mercy on him. But if someone was coming to attack me and my family, I would feel justified killing, but I'm not killing an innocent person. Like, does that make sense? I can't think of unless you can give me one. I can't think of a scenario where I would be killing or condoning killing of somebody who's not causing harm.
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. The thoughts that come to my head are some of the philosophy ideas. I think it
Mm-hmm.
is it a utilitarian that says that it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to flip the switch? And when if you save more lives, and then you
Yeah,
have the
most
Kantian
good
view,
for
it's
yeah.
Kantian view that says you can't flip the switch. So I guess that
Mm-hmm.
would be a certain view. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
there's more. Tell me this. What's your stance on abortion?
Um, it's kind of interesting. So I lean like I'll give you an example. Some people are probably going to hate me now because I'm going to admit this, but when Roe v. Wade was overturned, that did not hurt my feelings.
Mm,
but
interesting. Okay.
but at the same time, there's um it's kind of like it's like a gradation. Okay, this is kind of the thought process that I've gone through, that I'm like, if you have to like dismember the body of
Mm,
a baby in order to end the abortion, I think that you're harming the body. But if there's some kind of type of abortion where you're inducing labor or something like that, and it's not touching the body, but you're just basically not making available a way for it to keep growing, I think there's kind of a definite line
mm,
there. So maybe that's where my
okay.
line would be, is
Okay.
like there's like chemical abortions, and then there's the actual second trimester,
Okay.
just like dismemberment, basically. And I'm like,
Sure.
that
Okay.
seems like
So
a pretty clear line for me. I don't
sure.
know, but
Do
I'm very persuadable in that front. Like I
mhm,
have talked to some people that have had abortions, and they didn't have good resources. In
mhm,
order to be able to keep the baby, and it seems like they have a lot of regret that they wish they would have kept the baby, but they blame
mm,
themselves. They've been beating themselves up for 20 years, and even then they're not necessarily sure that that was necessarily a bad decision. And so anyway,
okay.
I've
Can
heard some
I?
experiences of
Mhm,
people that have actually had abortions too, and I I would never make any kind of judgment on someone that was either
Sure.
persuaded into that or felt like that was the only thing they could do. Like
Hmm.
that's really sad too. So,
Absolutely. I'm totally with you on that
anyways,
point. Let me ask you one question, then we can wrap up. I apologize for talking so much, but
you're good.
my final question for you on this morality topic. It's such a fascinating topic to discuss. Would you say that there are some morals, or let's say it like this: are there are some people's morals better than others? Like would you ever posit that your morality is better than another person's?
Um, yeah, sure.
Okay. And okay, so help me understand. So help me understand by what standard are you judging what's better and what's worse? Like, does it go back to the harm? Because you mentioned like dismembering the baby is harmful, so that's, you kind of shy away from that.
Hmm.
Tell me what you think about that. Because I'm trying to figure out what your standard is, and I, to be frank, I haven't yet heard like this is the standard, right? And that's why I'm not an atheist, or that's why I that's one of the pillars that keeps me from leaving theism,
Hmm.
is that to leave theism, or at least to criticize theism on any moral grounds whatsoever. Not that you've done that. I don't think you've done that.
Hmm.
A lot of people do. You are removing yourself from the worldview that justifies your righteous indignation of bad things happening in religion,
Hmm.
right? For that parent who says the church is harming the children. Okay, well, let's say I don't believe in God anymore because how could God let this happen? It's like, okay, you don't believe in God. By what standard are you making a judgment on the church? Why is it bad? Even if the church was causing suicide, which it's not,
Like I said,
why
it's
would that be bad?
I would
Right.
describe it as the standard
Mm-hmm.
that we've developed up to this point as humanity. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that standard has changed over humanity. Like even in the Bible, there's some stuff in there that is not
Mm-hmm.
good. Like so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so I don't see. It's interesting because it's like you say that you have a standard, but you don't know what the standard is.
oh no, I know what the standard is for sure. It's
So
the words of
I
it.
guess
Mm-hmm.
so do you believe that there's no more standard to be revealed or like you have the standard now?
Oh, it can be. It can be. God's laws can even be changed, but I would take a worldview of objective morality, meaning morality, because, and
How
this
can
is
it be
very.
objective if God's laws
Mhm.
can change? I don't understand that.
What I mean by objective is it's not decided by humans. And it's not even decided by God.
But
It's
that seems
decided
like
by.
kind of like
Mhm.
a wiggle around because then a human could say God changed it.
Sure,
But
and they
if
could be wrong, absolutely.
right,
But
yeah.
it's a worldview that posits a standard that is outside of humans,
But I don't think
right?
you escape the problem that you're positing on me though, because you still have the problem by not being able to know exactly what God wants by being an infallible human.
No, this goes back to the definition of knowledge. You can know for sure, right? That's why this all comes together, right?
You
And
can't know for sure. God can know that he for sure gave you something, but you can't know for sure that it was God that gave it to you.
oh, I can know for sure. I do know for sure. That's the coolest part about this whole thing.
Yeah, see, that doesn't make sense to me.
Okay,
Like,
and I think
it
from a
gets you out of the problem. I see how it gets you out of the problem, but it doesn't make sense to me how that actually happens.
okay, let me ask you this question: if God actually existed and God actually spoke to you, let's say um, let's say you were Joseph Smith and you're praying in the garden or
Mhm,
in the sacred grove, and God the Father and Jesus Christ, and I'm sure the Holy Ghost was present,
mhm,
appear to you, and they tell you everything that He told them.
mhm.
Would you say you still didn't know that you still actually didn't know that God existed?
Well, I would certainly be more certain if that happened than my current state, but I'd be even more certain if
Okay.
you were with me, Hayden, and you said you
Hmm.
saw it too. And then I'd be even more certain if it
Hmm.
could be caught on like video on our cell
Hmm.
phone, and then we could share it to people.
But is there
And
anything that could
then
get you to
I
100% or no?
Um, well, in the similar in a s like, you could get pretty sure, like with
By the way, you are giving Jacob Hansen's model, by the way. Oh, that's all it is.
He has caught God on video. What?
No. No, he is, all he's saying, and you probably have talked to him about this, and maybe your view.
No, I've heard his model. It's just that
all he's saying is what you're saying
I've had arguments with him on Facebook before where I told him that we have the same worldview. He just has special pleading when it comes to the church.
Okay.
We're operating in the same way.
I think it's very similar. I do. I agree with most of what you're saying, other than maybe it's semantics, maybe it's how I define an objective worldview, right? Because if God speaks to you, how more sure can you be? Like, if he actually has the power.
Like, what do you think I would say in response?
How do you know it was God?
How do you know you're not crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. But on a rational level, I 100% agree with you. But I'm convinced, because I accept words of modern prophets and they've proved true to me, we'll say that collective witness has brought me to this point where I have, in my mind, discovered that there is this underlying foundation of spirituality in all things, which, again, is that foolproof? Probably not. But
are you denying that there's any kind of problem with the claims?
Every worldview has problems.
Okay, so how do you update those without just leaning on, well, this is a really strong part of my belief, because you can't have morals without my belief, so therefore I don't need to update anything?
Well, I'm not saying you can't have morals. I'm saying there's no justification for morality outside of
atheists. That's fine, but then what about the problems with the worldview, the weak spots? Like, how do you are you
talking about this? Are you talking about this example specifically? Like, how do you know if God's speaking to you?
Well, this is something I kind of want to talk about. So, I guess I would like to find out the common ground of, like, why do you think the secular movement has been so popular?
Why is it so popular? I think I have an answer for that.
Okay, go ahead.
I had an experience in college where I joined an organization that was founded on ideals. I won't tell you what it is because I don't want to offend anybody. It was, in my experience, in my observation, it was very common for individuals to join this organization and leave their religion. A lot of them were Latter-day Saints, because they wanted the ideals, kind of like you're talking about, but they didn't want to be held accountable or punished for not meeting them. They wanted, and they wouldn't say it like this, but time and time again, it was obvious to me that the secular movement removes accountability. It ultimately removes agency, if you get down to what agency really is. And it removes, and I don't think a lot of people go into atheism or the secular or humane society movement thinking this. I don't think they would say it like this. But I cannot help but, through my perspective, see it like that. I do. I'll say this. I have an older brother. Both of my older brothers not active in the church. My oldest brother once told me, and he's removed his records from the church, and he's an atheist now. He told me years ago in a personal conversation that the reason he left the church is because it made him feel guilty, that he felt judged. And why should he let an organization judge him? And so, to escape judgment of his actions, which he did some things the church was not okay with, he said, well, there is no God. That was his stepping stone into atheism, was I should not be held accountable. And that word "should" is funny because it's a value claim. But I think, to answer your question, the secular movement is so popular because people do not want to be held accountable for their actions. That may be a hot take, and you would probably disagree. And I'm willing to hear you out. And I'm sure some people are genuine, and I'm sure some people don't view it that way.
Okay.
But over and over again, I find a common theme of mindset, that kind of mindset.
Well, I keyed on to something you said about your brother, and that was
Yeah.
that he was not going to be held accountable to an organization. I think there's a
Yep.
difference between an organization and God. That's just
Okay.
that's the first thing. Like one thing that I keep on hearing is that like how bad it is that you're not like keeping your covenants, and it's just like, well, I don't think I made those covenants with God. I feel
Mm.
like I made those covenants with an organization that I
Mm.
lost my loyalty to. So,
Okay.
I mean, even in some of some of the promises were not to God. It was like to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So
But
there's that.
you understand the connection there from a Latter-day Saint worldview. That's the same thing. That it's
Yes, but if you no longer believe that
sure, totally. Yep.
you're
Mm-hmm.
like I haven't. Yeah.
I would agree. From your
But anyway,
worldview, yeah, it's
and certainly we
probably
can both think of an
mhm.
example where someone makes a promise to somebody that they should break because
they
well,
should break
right.
or
I'm
tell
sure
me.
we both can think of an example of any, like just any, I know, use your
Mhm.
imagination of a promise that someone could make to somebody, but they should break it.
I'm drawing a blank. Are you
Really?
thinking about something specifically? Yeah, I don't.
I'm
Yeah, what
just
do you mean?
thinking of like a kid that makes a promise to a predator that they want to return.
Oh,
It's like there's
oh,
lots of
okay,
situations
okay,
where there
okay,
are
yeah,
you can make a promise to somebody and it was
okay,
not made on
sure. And
full knowledge, or if that's my
and
case, it wasn't made on
not to,
full knowledge, it wasn't made on
yeah,
it wasn't there's a power dynamic thing there where,
totally.
yeah.
And not to regress, but this is an example of cutting off the branch that you were once sitting on. You're using the word should, which is a value claim,
Oh, and that was
right?
the other thing I wanted to talk about. You keep on saying
Right.
that I can't say should. I would like
Well,
to posit that you
I
should
think
not
you.
be able to say should until
Mhm.
you can prove to everybody what God says.
Okay, yeah, and I disagree with that fundamentally.
Why?
I started from the beginning saying that there's no what's the word I'm looking for, ability. There's no possibility for me to exert my communication with God onto you. Like that's
Well,
like
until you can do that, I don't think you say should unless it's just should for
mhm.
you. You can't say should for
No.
everybody.
Here's the difference though. I would claim an objective source that is equal for all people. An atheist, I don't think can or wants to do that. Even at least.
Reality is pretty objective. Like glass
Mhm.
doors will hit your face just as much as they hit my
Sure.
face.
And I think it's good to warn people, from being physically harmed. But I'm talking about like morality, like if somebody comes up to me, no matter who they are, and they say they're going to cheat on their spouse, I would say you shouldn't do that, right? And if you're telling me I shouldn't be, it's funny, right? I shouldn't be able to use the word should, right?
Well,
I,
do you
mhm,
not believe that there are
mhm.
actual consequences to like cheating on your spouse that make your life worse?
If you can
Like,
get away with it, it'd probably make it better.
you
The,
don't think people
there are some, and from a
there's
secular
something
mind
Jordan
point.
Peterson says that I really
Mhm.
like, and he basically says you can lie, but it will always catch up to you.
Yeah, but Jordan Peterson, until he embraces the idea that there's objective morality, he is the same problem that you do. As brilliant as he is, he'll probably destroy me if what we start talking
Well,
about this, and he would say things I had no clue about.
well,
But
no,
if,
what I'm
mhm,
saying though is that
yeah,
psychologically, like
mm,
you are going to be in a living hell if you try to lie to yourself, and it always catches up to you. Like there
I
is a
mean,
reality out there. In fact, I would
mhm,
argue there's an objective,
mhm.
real way that we should act.
But that's
It is
assuming that
still
lies are always bad, which is an objective claim, right? Which is where I'm seeing the issue here, right? If
well. Then now you're getting to like spirit of the law, letter of the law, kind of in my
um,
mind, in a similar way. So
yeah,
let me give you an example.
okay,
Like like someone can give you a platitude of some sort and there's wisdom in it, and we kind of all recognize the wisdom in it, just because you can deconstruct it in some way somehow, like, so never lie. Well, what about if your wife says, how does this dress look, right? We
mhm,
always go to that example.
mhm,
So there's like a spirit of the law and like the
sure.
letter of the law of
I'll ask
these
my wife, do you want me to
platitudes.
be honest, or what do you want me to say?
Yeah.
Like, and I know Jacob Hansen's talked about this before, that there is a hierarchy of principles of morality, which I can see where it's coming from, but I've yet to wrestle with that. Maybe if God allows it, maybe that's the best way to say it, but I think that's shaky ground.
Yeah. Well, I think I can say should. Like, I don't think there's a problem with me saying should.
Okay, yeah, and
just like you don't think there's a problem with you saying should.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
So the difference, let's understand the difference there, though. You're saying that until I can prove it to everybody, I shouldn't be able to do it. And I'm saying until you claim an objective moral standard, like I see yours as a logical issue, where I don't see mine as a logical issue. I see mine as, I don't know, how would you categorize what you're...
It's actually a very similar problem, just at a different level. That's how I'm looking at it.
Okay. And by what means?
Well, I'm operating with the good faith that we live in this world and we kind of both have a good idea of what we should do, right? And I'm giving you that, but if you're not going to give me that I can say should, then I don't feel like you have the same problem of not being able to define what objective morals are objective.
Well,
you can't tell me what God says.
Here's the difference between our worldviews. If my worldview is true, then there's objective moral standard, meaning outside of humans. If your worldview is true, there's not.
No, I think it is outside of humans. I think there is a reality out there outside of humans that...
Okay, so tell me how you came to that conclusion. What's the standard? What's the standard of outside of humans that you're talking about? Like, how did you discover this?
No, actually, it can't be outside of humans. I take that back.
Okay, so that's by nature subjective.
It's subjectively human. I think there is a human morality.
Okay. Would you be in the camp of saying that whatever humans decide is moral is moral? Is that a definition of morality?
As long as all the humans can freely talk about what they think is moral, and then we all kind of agree on which ideas are best.
Okay, so where does that standard of free speech come from? Like, why do we need, where do you believe in free speech?
Oh, it goes back to the idea that having more eyeballs on something gives you a better view of it. So the singular view is pretty myopic.
Okay. How many I forgive me for probing, but this is I love talking about this, and I really want to get to the root of it. I'll be honest with you. I have yet to find an atheist provide an objective standard of truth. So if you were the first one to do
if your definition of objective truth is your definition, it wouldn't surprise me that another atheist doesn't think that God gave him the objective truth.
How do you, that's fair. That's a fair criticism. How do you define objective though? I don't know. How else do you define it other than it's outside?
The only reason I use objective, it's not because I think it's some kind of unchanging magical thing. It's just that I think there is a truth out there.
You keep saying truth out there, reality. I think, is that synonymous with reality? Is what you would say?
Yeah,
but reality doesn't.
It's very closely related. So there's limits to. There are limits.
Okay, limits.
There are preferences, right? And I'm not trying to place this objective morality on preferences, because we all agree that you can have different preferences.
Yeah. I once heard...
I don't need to make a morality claim on what kind of clothing we should all wear, because there's different people with different preferences.
Sure. Well, you've heard, I forget who said it. Is it, must be, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, Nietzsche. Nietzsche apparently said, I haven't read the book, but
I haven't read a lot. I know him through other people, and I did read the book that there's a guy that let me look at his name. I don't want to butcher it, but go ahead.
That's okay. Here's what Nietzsche said, and I think Nietzsche, from what I know about him and what he teaches or what he taught, he is as honest as an atheist can get, in that he's followed atheism to its logical conclusion, which ultimately is nihilism. But here's how he said it. Morality without God is simply, I'm paraphrasing, simply power plus preference. Meaning it's kind of like is it Plato? Plato's Republic. It's been I read it in college. It's been a long time. If I remember correctly, Plato defines justice as what is right according to the stronger. In other words, if you're taking a materialistic world, let's say like survival of the fittest, basically. Like if you're in the jungle and you're Simba, you're the king of the jungle, you get to decide what is right and what is wrong because you have the power to enforce punishment. And the Book of Mormon is wonderful. Alma 42 talks all about this. But without God, ultimately, morality becomes power plus preference, which is kind of what I hear you saying. That if enough eyes get on it.
No, I'm saying there's a difference between preference. And actually, as far as the idea that morality comes from the powerful, I would say that a society is most powerful when they can incorporate as much of the margins as they can, because that includes more viewpoints. Like I was saying, like the more viewpoints that you have, I think the stronger your idea of reality is. So, so you would be, if you only focus on one portion of humanity, then you would probably have a weaker worldview than if you took in all of humanity.
And help me understand what you mean by weaker, because that's another value claim. It's these words of better and weaker and stronger.
Weaker
and
being those that probably being those that they can't take care of themselves.
Okay, so you're using like well-being as a standard versus suffering. That's a common one.
Well-being. Yeah,
like healthy and strong compared to weak and sick. Right. Jacob Hansen did a whole video on this. I don't know if you've seen that. I would suggest your viewers to go watch that. It's really good.
Yeah, that's getting into like, I don't really love those videos because, like, I don't know. I feel like when you interact with someone, there's just, I understand that you want to go all the way down, but that doesn't necessarily help solve Mormonism problems. So I'm not sure why I go down that far.
Okay. Oh yeah, I would totally agree. Yeah, if you want to discuss Mormonism, but here's the issue though. If you want to discuss, or anyone wants to, and this actually happened. I don't know if you saw Bill Reel's conversation with Jacob or several conversations.
I did, and it was frustrating.
Yeah, I don't. It was frustrating for me, maybe for the opposite reason. I saw Bill wanting to sling mud at the church, and Jacob was saying, I'm willing to have these conversations if you can grant the level 1 and 2 conversations, which is God exists and Christ is Jesus is the Christ. And it didn't seem like Bill was willing to do that, because when you don't do that, when you have an atheist and a Mormon, you disagree. We disagree. Not you, but the atheist and the Mormon. We disagree at level 1 conversation. We're critiquing Mormonism from an atheist worldview. I would agree with you. Mormonism is crazy if you reject the existence of a God.
Well, I would argue that the morals exist kind of like, the belief that Mormons have that like the laws existed before God.
Oh yeah.
I still have that view. I just didn't have the God view. Maybe that's a good way to explain it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And I think Bill Reel would also agree with that. So that reason that debate was frustrating for me is because they weren't talking at the same level. They were talking past each other.
When you say laws, though, like the laws that I'm talking about are moral laws. Like that, I would assume you're not talking about morality. Like you're talking about laws of physics or gravity or like reality, because they're separate, right?
I forget about how long it's been since I've been. Yeah, I guess I don't see that being a barrier to letting go of extra beliefs that I don't believe.
Okay, that's fair, and I'm not necessarily critiquing that. I'm trying to figure out what's the standard, and is there an objective standard? And I don't know if you would agree. I think you'd have to say there is no objective standard. Like that's not even your claim. And
no,
that's the
it's not. It seems it seems that it doesn't matter if there's an objective standard, is what I said, is because we act as if there is, as society, we act as if there is a standard, and we're trying to find a better standard. So we
Mhm.
have decided what the standard is. I'm not sure it helps to have the belief that there's an objective one when we can't know what it is. Like, I mean, you
Sure.
claim to have a standard,
Yeah.
but can't test it. We can't know
Oh,
if
you
your
can test
standard
it.
is the right one.
Oh, absolutely you can. Live all the laws of the gospel of Jesus Christ and see how it changes your life. Take out the people who cause issues, like the bishop who offended you or who did something horrible or said something stupid. Live the gospel of Jesus Christ as taught by ancient modern prophets.
Hmm.
That's testable, because the promise is if you do this, this will happen. That's a principle, right? In essence, I would disagree that it's not testable.
Mm, yeah.
And I think morality is
What do you
testable in
think I'm thinking
general.
right now? What do you think I'm thinking?
I
That
think
might
you're
be more
thinking
fun.
I
Let's
think you're
see people.
thinking that I talk too much and we need to be done.
No, I'm thinking that um I'm thinking that that doesn't help me know that something is true
Okay, yeah.
or not. Or
Hmm. Well, if
let
you're
me go. Let me
only
go.
oh, yeah, yeah,
I wanted to go down this other path.
okay,
Then we got sidetracked because I
yeah,
said that you can't say should either. I shouldn't
yeah,
have
yeah.
done that. I should
Well,
not have done that.
without a standard, no, I'm just kidding. By the way, I want to just I hope people watching this don't feel like there's contention. I hope you don't feel contention. I know I'm
I don't feel contention,
okay.
but there's
Like I
definitely a
think
spot that we're not getting past, so maybe we'll
yeah,
have to think
but
about it longer.
I just wanted to just pause and say, like, I think you are wonderful. Like, you are very pleasant to talk with and interesting to talk with. So, like, I hope that you are feeling the same way I am. Like, this is fun.
Yeah. Um, so I would say that whatever good that the church has to offer, I don't think has to be disrupted by like knowledge
Mhm.
of church history. Like,
Okay.
maybe that's the best way to put it.
Yep.
However, it seems to anyway, right? Like it seems that people learn church history or um, they they start doing like an outsider test of faith, and then they start to lose confidence in their
Hmm.
the church that they were brought up to believe, their childhood faith. So, and that's common across all religions, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah. So, I guess my question is that a fruit of the church that they have produced so many of people like me that are swayed by simple church history? Like, is that a fruit of the church, or does that make sense?
Are
What I'm
you?
trying to say?
Yeah, but potentially. Let me ask you a few clarifying questions. Are you saying that was that you said you read Saints and that kind of led you down the path? Can you help me understand, like, more specifically? Was it plural marriage or race in the priesthood, or what was
Well, the first
what?
thing was that I learned a bunch of stuff that I kind of dismissed as being anti-Mormon lies, and then I learned that it was true, so that was hard.
Well, there's a difference between a truth and a truth framed in a way that's
Well,
that
I guess, well, here's an example. I kind of I found at one point early when I was married, I got this bright idea and I was like, I'm going to go look at Wikipedia and see what the world says about Mormonism because it's
Mm,
clearly true. What kind of mental gymnastics do they have to do to like
mm,
come up with it not being true? Like that was sincerely like what I was going into Wikipedia
mhm,
thinking. And then I read about Fanny Alger, and then I was like, well, that's weird. I never learned that Joseph Smith didn't have more than one wife. I definitely would have learned about that in church history if Joseph Smith had more than one wife. Like I have never heard of this before. This must be a lie. And then I stopped researching, and I kind of said to myself, like, it doesn't even matter if I find the original document and it really verifies that this Fanny Alger person actually existed. Like, I can't really know truth in any other way except by praying. And so I couldn't ever verify if that document was real or not. And so then I just
Can I
decided
ask what year this was? When did this happen?
this happened probably around 2008 or 9, maybe.
Okay.
But just when Wikipedia was starting to gain some steam as being like a quick source to go look something up. And I was
This is
already
like the
using
birth
it.
of, yeah.
Yeah, it was really early. Like, it was when Office was making a joke about, hey, Wikipedia, great source. Everybody can write anything they want, right? It was
Yeah, right.
it was around that same time.
Okay.
So, but I was using it a lot in a lot of other places, like whether I had to look something up really quick for school. It was just it was a quick source, and it would list its own sources so I could go look up the actual source, right? So, so anyway, I that's when I first learned that Joseph Smith, that's when I first heard the claim that Joseph Smith had more than one wife. And so then I dismissed it. And then, I really didn't go down the rabbit hole after that. I just kind of backed off, and I said that the only way that I can know anything is through revelation. And that was that. Like, I didn't investigate anymore. So then I read Saints, fast forward a lot of years.
Like 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I didn't read it until 2019. So fast forward probably about 10 years. Yeah, you're right. So, yeah. So then I read Saints, and then I learned about Fanny Alger in Saints. So, just that it was a legitimate claim, like, surprised me, I guess. Enough that even a church produced source was talking about it. So obviously it was good enough to. And then I also read the original sources with it, and the way that the church portrayed it in Saints was different than the way I would have summarized it. And then it was like the very first time I ever saw anything that the church did as biased. Like, I always thought the church was really objective about the way they presented information. I never thought that, like, so anyway.
And what can I ask? What about the Fanny Alger story bothered you? Was it just simply more than one wife, or was there any specific element that you were morally abhorrent to?
I'm trying to remember. I thought it was weird that he asked the uncle for, like, permission first. And like, it felt like he was trying to make sure he didn't make certain people mad before asking her. Like he was trying to, I don't know. I don't know. I thought that was weird.
Okay. So here's one thought I have on this. From would you consider yourself an atheistic worldview, or how would you just, like, agnostic, or from a non-LDS worldview, maybe is the best way to say it? Sorry, I should have let you answer.
I guess it's probably agnostic is probably the best way to describe it.
Okay. So kind of going back to what we were talking about before, here's my point about Fanny. From a non-Latter-day Saint perspective, I would dare to say non-Christian perspective, because there's obviously plural marriage in the Bible, and we can talk about that. But from a non-Christian perspective, it doesn't look very good. I almost don't blame you for feeling that way, right? If your presupposition is maybe the church is not true, it is. How do you there's issues with the morality, and we've talked about that more than we need to. But
well, how do you deal with people that still have that moral standard because they are in the church? Because I still definitely had, at least at that point, I had the hope that the church was true. It wasn't that I wasn't looking at that story from an antagonistic point of view. I wanted the church to be true. I was kind of disappointed to learn that information.
Okay, here's my question to you. When you were active Latter-day Saint, did you believe that Abraham was a prophet of God?
What do you mean?
Like when you were practicing Latter-day Saint, the prophet Abraham,
Hmm.
did you believe that he was a prophet of God?
Well, sure. Like, I don't
Okay.
know why
Did
I
did
wouldn't.
did you know about his plural marriages?
Um, Not really, I guess. We didn't,
Okay.
not out. I mean, getting to church history, I realized that Joseph Smith justified his plural marriage from the Old Testament, but
Well,
I'm not sure that
God
I'm
justified
not
it,
sure I
right?
ever studied that or was aware of it. And I knew like a lot of people had a problem with like worrying about whether they were going to have like sister wives in heaven. And I just remember
Mhm.
thinking, I'm not worried about it because I knew that God was good and God would do the right thing. And if that was the right thing, then I wouldn't be worried about
Mm,
it. Like I don't know.
sure.
I just didn't worry about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think from a Latter-day Saint perspective, that's a logical conclusion that if God is good and he is fair,
Hmm.
then I don't have to worry about it. From a non oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so it's when you lose your loyalty to the church, though, that you all of a sudden all of those things that weren't problems before become problems. And I
Mhm.
understand that you think that once you leave the church, you have no moral standards, but somehow we
Well,
still do.
let's clarify that. And I've said a couple of times, I want to clarify. I'm not saying atheists don't have morals or moral standards. I'm saying they cannot justify them because they do have them. My brother
Yeah.
is an example. He has a moral standard. He lives his life in a hierarchy of evil and good. Right? He does things that he thinks will benefit his life morally and his marriage and his children. Those are moral
Mhm.
decisions that he's placing. My critique of that is he has no um, standard by which to truly judge what is better versus what is worse. It's kind of like, oh yeah, society decides this is what's worked before. It's
Do you
like,
do you
mhm.
believe that God is still interacting with your brother?
Sure, I think God interacts with every person every day.
And so do you believe that God helps other people understand what the standards better worse is?
Potentially, yes. Yeah, I don't think church membership is a requirement for revelation.
Mhm.
I think the divine can talk with whoever he
So
wants.
from your worldview, wouldn't you say that like I still have a standard then?
From my worldview, everyone has an objective standard. Are they going to recognize it? No. Are
Well,
they
if
going
I'm
to?
recognizing it, but I'm using like a different language with it, or I can't, I don't understand God in the right way, like that doesn't
Um,
necessarily change that I have a standard, right?
um, well, with my worldview, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly. With my worldview, yeah, we all have this. From your own worldview, I have not yet heard you refer to what is the standard.
Well,
Like, can you tell me what that is? And if so, then yeah,
do you believe any like a young earth or old earth or
old probably.
okay, so as far as like when humans were developing and they didn't
Hmm.
have like a knowledge of God because they couldn't even articulate a story
Hmm.
necessarily, did they
Hmm.
have objective truth
Yeah, I have.
or objective morals?
Yes, let me kind of explain my
Okay.
take on this. Obviously, I don't know for sure, and this is not something that I
Well,
can say
no,
I have on.
this is I'm
Mhm.
trying to understand.
Yep.
I'm trying if I can understand where you're coming from, maybe I can understand why I don't have
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
a standard because
Sure.
from what I see, the standard just is there. So,
Okay. And that has hints of LDS theology attached to it because we would say eternal
and
law,
that's maybe
right?
that's why because I grew up LDS. But
Yeah.
um,
But the I think the fair question to ask you and I we don't need to beat a dead horse, but
mhm,
is um what is like or I should say it like this. What makes something good or bad? Like, for example, when I asked you, is it okay to kill an innocent person? You said you don't know. And I think that's a good answer for your worldview because there is no objective standard to say yes or no. For me,
mhm.
it was no, you cannot kill an innocent person. I would say that that's objective, right? I think that's fruits of your lack of lack of objectivity. I don't know how
Well,
to
it
say
was
that, but
also when you said, I missed that you said innocent too. So
oh,
there's
okay. Maybe
that
there was a
too.
misunderstanding there.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, what were we just talking about? What were we just saying before that?
Well, I wanted to ask, like, if
Yeah.
like before there was like the idea of
Oh.
a monotheistic
Mm-hmm.
God, for example, did they have
Mm-hmm.
standards?
Mm-hmm. So there's two ways you can look at this. I personally don't believe that the Neanderthals or the cavemen or whatever the scientific word is for those individuals, I do not believe those were children of God. I believe the first children of God were Adam and Eve. And I believe Adam and Eve were on the earth 6,000 years ago. Now, is the earth a lot older than that? Absolutely. Was there animals and people before them? Absolutely. But
No. So in Jordan, did you ever
mhm.
listen to Jordan
Oh,
Peterson's Maps of Meaning?
I started, never finished. I
Was
probably
that
got
why? Because you
through.
got into like some of that stuff?
No, it was just had other things. Yeah. Is there anything specific you're thinking about
Well,
from
just the
there?
way that he describes how ideas have evolved. He very much takes the scientific view,
Hmm.
or whatever the secular world is kind of discovering about human history. He would not. He would believe in basically common ancestors, like we're cousins to, like
Okay.
right, like he would believe in evolution, I guess, is the best
Sure.
way. I guess you believe in evolution too, but
I believe in evolution, but not of
you're
humans.
saying there was something special about Adam and Eve, and so like
Well, I
I don't
can,
know,
I
like
can, mhm.
he talks a lot about the earliest stories in the Bible, and then he also talks about like where they came from, and it doesn't
Mm,
seem to be. It seems to be like these oral stories that were passed down for a really long
mhm,
time, and he said that they must have been important if they were
mm,
remembered and passed on, and that's why they were written down.
okay.
Um, and so it's less of a like God dictated it, more of a tradition that was passed down. That makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit about my position on Adam and Eve. Here's kind of a funny question for you. Do you well, when you were a Latter Day Saint, did you believe that Adam had a belly button? Did you ever think about that?
I did think about it, and I just didn't think it was important. So,
Okay, I think it's very important.
so yes
And
or no?
the answer is yes.
He did have a belly
Um,
button,
oh yeah, he was born, and she was born the same way we were born, of
but
heavenly
a different
parents.
spirit was breathed into them.
Um, well, their physical bodies were created by our heavenly parents physically in the same way that we are born, is what I would say. And this, I
Mhm.
think this is a Parley P. Pratt idea that started a long time ago. I think this also solves the issue of why does the church not practice gay marriage? And in my mind, the reason is because you cannot do what our heavenly parents are doing unless you have a male and a female,
Mhm.
which is to populate worlds. I believe we are all not only spirit children of God, but physical offspring of our heavenly parents. That's why we have divine godhood, is because we are their physical children, starting with Adam and Eve anyway. And then
Hmm.
you have the fall and the curse of the earth anyway. But to answer your question, about young earth versus old earth, I take a young Garden of Eden approach, but an old earth, like earth could be eons old. I don't know.
Okay. Well,
So
um, do you think that here's some ideas that I got from Jordan Peterson, and I think I
mhm.
agree with him.
Okay.
As we became scientific, we started to read the Bible in a scientific way, but it was never meant to be read
Mm,
in a scientific, literal way.
sure.
Like, what are your views on that?
Yes, I have heard. I think I could agree with that, but I also have heard, and this may be totally wrong. I really have not verified this, so people should look it up for themselves. That the order of creation, even as taught in Genesis, actually aligns with the scientific understanding of the creation of the earth.
Hmm.
When I say creation, I mean evolution of the earth, right? That there was a sphere, and then there was the water, and then the earth, and then the plants, and then the animals, like that. Even from an atheistic worldview, if you take the Big Bang, even that this earth or life is created in that manner, year
Yeah.
after year. So that maybe that doesn't really answer your question, but I'd be okay saying that scientifically, Moses wasn't thinking about science, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't take it literally. You take it as like stories, like passed down.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
But important stories. Like, I'll be honest, when I went through my collapse of belief, that story of Adam and Eve came alive for me in a way that I had never seen it before. Like,
Wow.
it seems like a very, very, very true story. So,
wait, tell me about that. It seems like after your faith crisis, or
during, like, I feel like
during.
that story resonated with the experience of having a collapse of belief.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you want to talk about that at all? That seems like a pretty personal.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, in the story, it would be like you take the fruit of knowledge, and I felt like I learned something, and I was cast out of the garden. I felt like I was cast out of
Oh.
a more simplistic worldview, and I was out in the lone and dreary world where, like, I had to kind of figure out my own way. Like, there's
Okay.
definitely a feeling of when you have a collapse of belief and you can no longer, like, honestly participate in your childhood religion. It feels very lonely. You feel out in the lone and dreary world. And I don't know, and as far as that, I'm using that analogy. What I feel like I'm doing is I am trying to make the right sacrifices, and I am trying to figure out what is what. And it is interesting how you can't go back. You can't just go back to the garden. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I can appreciate and respect what you're saying. I think that aligns actually perfectly with what you've experienced.
Yeah, for sure. And
Did you? Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask a follow up. Like, did that? Did you use Jordan Peterson? Like, was he an influence in you seeing it that way, or did you?
No, I've never
This was
heard
separate.
him talk about it like that.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I was listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson though. And so I was seeing stories in a different way, and in my own experiential way.
Yeah. It's either when I listen to Jordan Peterson, either I walk away feeling smarter or I walk away feeling a lot more dumb. Like, just listening to him, I'm like, wow, he's really smart. So I'm glad though. Like,
Well, I think that story is really true on a lot of levels. Like, and that bugs some secular, materialistic atheist types, because they're like, yeah, you can interpret into a story. Like, Sam Harris does this thing with he just grabs a book out of the library, and it happens to be a cookbook, and he throws open the book, and then he goes and he reads this recipe, and he interprets into all of this meaning. And he uses that to show, like, well, there's nothing special about any story. It's just the way you interpret it, blah, 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 blah. So,
yeah. And I can kind of agree with that. I think what he's missing is the intent of the author. What was intended by the words.
Maybe. It's weird how, like, the Adam and Eve, like, that's not the only way you can look at the Adam and Eve story. And so it's interesting to me. Like, it was pretty profound when I looked at it like that. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It was like, I've known this story. I've known this story all of my life, and it, like, came alive for me. So it was
you were living it. Like, that makes total sense. I appreciate you sharing that. That's really, and I think that's even helpful for Latter-day Saints. If there's any Latter-day Saints watching this, I think that's helpful to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like, empathize with those who experience what you experienced. I think that's great.
Right.
It's good.
Well, I guess what I was trying to get at a little bit is just how, maybe 100 years ago, or maybe even, like 100 years ago, people would have rejected the old earth completely, right? And they would have said that, like, you have to believe this in order to be, like, a good believer in God, because God can't be this and this. But then you along with others have kind of adjusted and adapted your belief to include a way for the old earth to be there. And so I guess there seems to be some issues with the way that people say, well, in order to be a believer in God, you have to believe this, but then they're wrong about this later on.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Because it used to be like Darwin against everybody else, and now there's several theists that are okay with Darwin's theories.
Sure. I would maybe argue that a lot of people felt that way, but I'm not sure every single person on the planet felt that way. That may have been the most popular belief, but to say that everybody felt that way, I don't know if that's the most accurate, or I don't know if using absolute language is accurate there.
Okay.
And I would also that's point one. Point two would be, I think, at least for regarding scripture, when I think of scripture, when I think of the creation story, either in Genesis or in the book of Abraham for Latter-day Saints, it always has left room for an old earth creation. I mean, you look at Abraham chapter 4, when the gods are commanding the elements to come together, and it says in verse 18 that they waited until they were obeyed. Like that word waited constitutes time, right? And then you go to Abraham chapter 5 that talks about 1,000 years on earth is one day to God, right? And it's these different timetables. My point being that a lot of people may have felt that. Joseph Smith may have felt that. Brigham Young, maybe all the prophets, maybe all the most members of the church. I don't know, but a young earth is what I'm talking about. They may have believed that, but I think the revelation has always left room. And maybe they didn't see it, but it's always left room for this. So does that make sense, though? Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you're saying there was no one was ever going to be kicked out for having that view, but it does seem like there's definitely
a social aspect to it,
especially within the broader Christian world. There was, I would say, until pretty recently, like you were considered maybe like progressive Christian if you believed in it. You know what I mean? Like, and now you have plenty of people within the walls of traditional Christianity that you can believe that and you're still within the wall. So I guess there's just I actually believe that like you do need to update your beliefs. Like you can't be rigid.
But what if your belief is true though? Do you have to update it still?
Well, I guess there are some people that still believe in a young earth and they're pretty rigid and they still might be right. Then maybe, but I doubt it.
Well, I'm saying like for you, like you're saying we should always update our beliefs, or maybe that's not the phrase you use, but is there ever a time where you should not be updating your belief because you got it right? Do you live your life in that way at all?
Of course, but I try to adjust my confidence levels so that like if I'm wrong, I can also update the ones that are wrong.
Yeah, I like that. I think all people should do that. Yeah. But to me, it doesn't make any sense. Like, let me just use kind of a weird example. I have car keys sitting right here, right? I have a belief. Where's my camera? I have a belief. You can see I drive a Honda.
Yeah.
That if I plug this into my ignition and I turn it, it's gonna at least attempt to start my car, right?
Yeah.
Do I need to update that belief? Like, of course not. Like, that's the way to turn on my car. Like, I have that right. Now, it may not turn on based on how it's working, but my point is there are some things where you get right, and so there's no need to update. Does that make sense? I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Well, yeah, you don't. Yeah, you wouldn't.
Or like walking, like you know how to walk. You don't.
This kind of gets into Jordan Peterson again. He kind of talks about how you have to. Did you ever hear him talk about tickling a baby?
It sounds familiar, but you have to remind me.
He talks about tickling a baby, and someone says you're doing it wrong, and as a person, you can go, okay, I need to learn how to tickle a baby better, or you can go, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. I can't even tickle a baby. I can't even do this. I can't even do this, and then you just everything collapses, right?
Okay.
And I'll admit that I probably was the collapse person when the collapse of belief happened, but I think it kind of runs into what you were saying where I cut off the branch that I was standing on. But I guess what I'm trying to ask you is when you see people cutting off the branches that they're standing on, like how do you prevent that from happening? Because the reason that they're sawing the branch is, it seems to be a legitimate reason.
Yep.
And what I'm kind of thinking is that there's value in scriptures. Like I guess there's a lot of atheists that go anti-religion, and I have decided not to do that because I feel like by doing that, I'm not cutting off the branch that I'm standing on.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah,
make
and I only use that analogy in regards to morality.
Well,
That's
I'm guess I'm just using it in a different way. So
okay.
I hear that you're not saying this is the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's just as far as respecting where my ideas have come from and respecting the wisdom of my ancestors, that this was worth passing down to their children. But it also doesn't seem good to like put your head in the sand and deny that there's a problem. Like there does seem to be a problem with people integrating church history, for example, with their beliefs, or integrating some scientific things that they learn. Like I know a lot of people that, not a lot, I've heard stories of, people where they can't match what they were taught at church and then what they're learning in a scientific classroom or something like that. So where do you think that contention is there with people leaving their religions for those reasons?
Maybe I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I'm not doing a very good job.
No. That's I want to understand it though. I think there's something here. Contention between like them and the religion or the people, or help.
Okay. There's a better word for it. It's overused though, so I don't love it, but it is the word. It's cognitive dissonance. So you're learning something, and it's not meshing with what you already believe, and so the way that a lot of people will fix that is they'll take it down really low in order to get their beliefs to mesh up again. So
take what down low? What do you mean by that?
Their beliefs. So like, for example, if you were brought up in a home, especially if you were brought up, because I know that there are lots of different kind of Latter-day Saint homes, but let's say you were brought up in a home where it was young earth or else there's no God, right?
Okay.
And you become convinced because you end up researching something in biology and you learn about biology, and then you're like, well, I can't deny. And you learn about DNA. I don't know. You learn about something and you're like, I can't deny that this is what I believe. And now you have that cognitive dissonance where if I believe this, then there is no God.
Okay, sure. Like you're believing.
So that's cutting it down all the way. Other people that have that cognitive dissonance, they can go, oh, there can be an old earth and there can still be a God. And so they modify their belief in some other way. But it's not so drastic.
Yeah, I think this is good. I think the premise of the issue is that there are standards being put forth that are not true in their nature, right? So to give the premise that the earth is young or whatever, and or they give an argument. I don't even know what the argument is, to be honest. I'm trying to add this together, but there's premises that add up to the conclusion of, if the earth is old, there is no God. That's what's the word? That's an invalid argument. Like those premises do not add up. Like I can't think of premises that would add up to that. So it was wrong from the beginning, even if people believe.
Well, yes, I understand that. I guess what I'm trying to say is essentially there seem to be beliefs that are widely held by Latter-day Saints, though, that would have that cognitive dissonance where you learn it in the real world and then you have this cognitive dissonance.
Okay, like, can you give me an example?
Well, one is that you believe that Joseph Smith only had Emma Smith as a wife.
But that's not true, though. The premise is not true.
But the belief though, you have this belief over here.
Oh, okay.
And then you have you learned that he did have more than one wife, and then that there's that cognitive dissonance. You have to figure out.
Oh, Sure. Yeah. So what is your question? I understand kind of what you're
There
saying.
are
Like
these
that's the
things that
scenario.
cause
Mhm,
they're the things that cause this with
mhm.
people. Like there seems to be a lot of these that are causing people. And
Mm.
now you're saying they have a wrong premise to just conclude that the church is not true.
Well, I would say
They're
the
cutting it
wrong.
down too much. They're just not just up to, there's some kind of
Well, there's
apologetic conclusion that you can arrive at, and I don't know.
sure. Well, what I meant by that was like if you believe Joseph Smith only had one wife, you're wrong, right?
Yeah.
But if you believe that Joseph Smith plus multiple wives equals the church is not true, you're also wrong. So like from the foundation,
Hmm.
but I understand that happens. I understand people feel that way,
Yeah,
right?
maybe this isn't a good way to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm probably just misunderstanding. I apologize.
Well,
If
let me ask
okay.
this. This might be like a more personal question for you,
Yeah.
but is there an item example that you can give me where you learned something and it doesn't you haven't figured out how to fit it in yet? So,
Yes. Um but I haven't done enough research on it. But for now, I don't understand the current argument of Deutero Isaiah in regards to the Book of Mormon. Are you familiar with that?
mm-mm.
So, from what I understand, there are historical evidences that the Book of Isaiah was written in three parts. I forget what the first one's called. Anyway, the second one's called Deutero Isaiah,
Okay.
and then there's like a try one or whatever. And the idea is that in the Book of Mormon, there are quotes from Deutero Isaiah that were not written until after Lehi left Jerusalem,
Hmm.
or they weren't available. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So to believe that the Book of Mormon is a historical record, and then to have something in the Book of Mormon to have on its face value, it looks like a true anachronism, like something that doesn't belong. It's like if I read that Lehi had a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, no, he didn't. Like I know
Right.
that for a fact. There's an issue, and I don't understand it completely. There's definitely apologetic answers on Fair Mormon and whatever that I haven't dove into. But when I heard that, I said, "Oh, that's really interesting. I really need to look into that because if it's true that Nephi and Lehi are quoting a book that they didn't have access to, that may be reason to not believe the Book of Mormon, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one example of a million you could give that also have apologetic answers. But yeah, that's maybe one. Does that answer your question? Maybe.
Yeah. So like let me go. Let's just assume that that's true.
Okay.
Like, how do you handle that?
Um, if I came to believe that the Book of Mormon,
No,
what?
not that the
Okay.
if you came to believe
Hmm.
that um
Oh, that there was. Okay.
right, the thing that you
Um,
set up
uh,
that
to be honest, I would be able to justify it in some way, probably, because my belief in the Book of Mormon is not centered on the Isaiah issue or the Deutero Isaiah issue.
okay.
I have a more fundamental like foundation of the Book of Mormon that again I could probably come up with an apologetic answer to still believe it if I'm being honest with you.
So I'm trying to figure out like so where I was trying to go is like
Mm,
it seems like you just named one thing and it seems like
mhm,
there's like a laundry list of things.
mhm.
And I guess do you see them as problems to sting like the purpose of the church, or do you see them like I don't know quite how to word it.
I'm
Like
I'm trying to think like if what
what
are
I
you,
guess what I'm trying to say,
mhm,
let's just say that you came to the conclusion that the Book of Mormon is not a historical document that
sure,
it was given to Joseph Smith by the power of God, and that meant
by,
something else, that it wasn't a historical document.
sure.
Um, would it then bother you when other people at church keep on asserting that it's a historical document?
Mhm. I wouldn't be a Latter Day Saint if I believed that. I think the historicity of the Book of Mormon is tightly. I know not everyone believes this. I've met some Latter Day Saints who believe what you're saying.
Right. That's
But I believe that here's the thing about the church and church history.
Yeah.
Our history is tightly woven into our authority in our truth claims. Like, for example, Joseph Smith says that Peter, James, and John came in reality as angels and placed their hands on him and Oliver's heads and gave them priesthood keys. That's a historical event, but it's also a truth claim of authority. Like he says, now I now have the authority. If that didn't happen, that would invalidate his authority. And I see that if the Book of Mormon is not an actual historical record, I can't see it as valid. At least in my mind, anyway.
That's interesting. I need to find something else then. Something that's not going to sway you out of the church. I guess what I'm trying. I'm trying to understand, like, if you recognize that there are some traditional ways of viewing the church that aren't necessary to participate in the church.
Okay, I have one.
Okay.
I hate it. I hate it when people pray faithless prayers by saying, Heavenly Father, please bless this food that's going to nourish and strengthen our bodies. And they're blessing the pizza from Little Caesars, or they're blessing the donuts at Mutual. Or when they say, Heavenly Father, please help the people who are not here this Sunday that they can be here next week. Like from an agent point of view, like those traditions of language of prayer, or even just asking to bless the food. Heavenly Father, please bless this food. Or please, what's the other one? Please bless the hands that prepared it, or what, you know all the phrases.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like those phrases. I don't think they're helpful. I think they are vain repetitions. So that's one that most Latter-day Saints will say those things. I will not say them, but it doesn't dissuade me from leaving the church. I don't know. Is that a good example?
No.
I'm trying to think of something that I disagree with the majority on.
Yeah.
Or the traditional view.
Yeah.
Does it have to be a truth claim, or like the fundamentals? One of these days, maybe we'll have to chat again about the Book of Mormon. There's a lot of conversation to be had there. Or maybe you should interview Brian Hales. Do you know Brian? You probably know Brian Hales.
Yeah, I would have him on if he'd come on.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can get a lot of those people that are.
I think he would.
I haven't tried. Like, I should probably.
If you want to talk about the validity,
do you know who I really want to talk to?
Yeah, who's that?
Halverson, whatever that guy's name.
Oh, not Chal Halverson. Jared Halverson.
Yeah.
He seems like a good guy. I've seen him do firesides and stuff, but I've never seen him do a podcast. He probably has done podcasts, actually. Now that I
listened to some podcasts. He has this one where he claims that he talks to people in other faiths a lot and stuff. So I think there's maybe a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, you should set that up. I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while here. So I will let you go. I'll officially end it. Thank you, Hayden, for having this conversation. I think it was fun. I think we definitely hit some spots where we couldn't get past, but that's okay.
Yeah. And that means we're having the good conversations, though. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. And I think we should talk again. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. Anytime. Thank you very much. This has been really, really fun and pleasant. I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
And then just really quick, I said should.
Yes. We'll have to beat that dead horse another day.
Yeah. All right.